News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Brown.
Or is political art needed now more than ever? We'll ask GBH's Jared Bowen to weigh in on that question and get the rest of his weekly arts and culture thoughts. And later in the show, former Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Chief Margaret Marshall joins us. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President-elect Donald Trump has arrived in Washington for a meeting with President Biden at the White House today. Biden has invited Trump to visit. Last hour, the president-elect met with Republican members of the House near Capitol Hill. Trump thanked them for their support.
We worked with a lot of you to get you in, and you helped me, and you helped me too.
He later joked with the GOP lawmakers about his future ability to run again for the White House. Members of the U.S. Senate are holding leadership elections now at the Capitol. Republicans will control the chamber in the next session with 53 Senate seats. So whoever the GOP senators choose will also become the new Senate Majority Leader. Some of the names being floated to play leading roles in health policy in the incoming Trump administration are prominent vaccine skeptics. NPR's Maria Godoy reports some pediatricians are nervous.
People being mentioned to head the Department of Health and Human Services include Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo. Both men have used their platforms to spread vaccine misinformation. Meanwhile, routine childhood vaccination rates have dropped in the majority of U.S. states. Pediatrician Lisa Gwynn worries those rates will fall further if vaccine skeptics are in charge of national health policy.
I'm very concerned, as are all pediatricians across the nation. One of our primary roles as pediatricians is keeping children safe, and the most effective way to keep children safe from preventable communicable diseases is vaccines.
She says for now, all pediatricians can do is educate lawmakers on the consequences of not vaccinating children. Maria Godoy, NPR News.
A U.S. jury has awarded 3 survivors of the Abu Ghraib prison $42 million. NPR's Ruth Sherlock reports this trial is the only case heard by an American jury detailing the abuses at the hands of U.S. troops in Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq.
The jury said a U.S. military contractor, CACI or CACI, could be found guilty of the torture and mistreatment of the plaintiffs because the interrogators it supplied to Abu Ghraib had instructed military police officers to, quote, soften up the detainees. CACI says its employees were not responsible for, nor did they take part in mistreatment or torture committed by military police in Abu Ghraib. The guilty verdict is the result of a 16-year-long legal battle, and although it helps these 3 plaintiffs, many other former detainees of Abu Ghraib remain without redress. The US military has not paid compensation or set up a mechanism for the survivors' claims to be heard. The Associated Press reports that CACI will appeal the verdict. Ruth Sherlock, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks are mixed. The Dow is up nearly 130 points. The Nasdaq is down more than 30. This is NPR.
Good morning with the latest from the GBH newsroom. I'm Henry Santoro. Inquiring minds want to know if Boston is turning red. The Dorchester Reporter reports that in 17 of Boston's 22 wards, the 2024 vote for the Democratic presidential ticket was down by more than 20%. This year's election results show that Boston remains a Democratic stronghold, but this time there was a noticeable downturn in support for the party's presidential ticket. The report says thousands of voters sat this election out, meaning that it was less about Donald Trump's surge and more about voters not being supportive of the Harris-Walz ticket. Bay State Health in Springfield has announced that it's laying off 134 employees, roughly 1% of its workforce, in a move to reduce costs. CEO Peter Banco says 134 that are getting their pink slips are all in leadership positions. Like many hospital systems in the Commonwealth, Bay State, which is the largest healthcare system in Western Mass, has continued to lose money after the pandemic. Banco says the system has lost over $300 million over the past few years. And the hospital thrift shop on India Street on Nantucket Island has made a $625,000 donation to the Nantucket Cottage Hospital. Wrapping up its 95th year in business, the thrift shop presented the gift to hospital officials yesterday. Current reports that the money came from sales at the thrift shop over the past 5 months. Not bad. $625,000 matches the thrift shop's gift from last year, which was its largest donation in a single year. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people. Online at wtgrantfoundation.org. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock today, the former Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Margaret Marshall is here. We're so glad we're going to be able to talk to her today. Morning, Jim.
Hi there, Marjorie. How are you?
I'm good. I'm better than you, I think.
No, well, maybe not. So Donald Trump has long campaigned on a promise to deport millions of people. Mass deportation are the watchwords. Here's his new border czar, Tom Homan, speaking with 60 Minutes correspondent Cecilia Vega before the election about what his immigration plans could look like.
It's not going to be a mass sweep of neighborhoods. It's not going to be building concentration camps. I've read it all. It's ridiculous.
But if mass deportation is not going to be, as you said, massive sweeps and concentration camps,
There'll be concentrated.
what is it?
There'll be targeted arrest.
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Let me repeat that. Of course there is. Families can be deported together. And in many of those families, by the way, the child is a United States citizen. So how are you preparing for Trump's January 20th deportation plan? They say they're going to start on day one. If you voted for Donald Trump, is this what you were voting for? How are you preparing? Is cruelty really the point here, as it is with so many other policies in this country? And if you're troubled by the policy, what do you plan to do about it? At 877-301-8970, you can call or text. And I should say he's joined in this effort by Steve Miller, who will be the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. Is it unfair for me to describe Miller as a white supremacist? I think it's totally fair, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I guess you could, actually.
I don't think there's any hesitation. He has reposted white supremacist postings on Twitter or X and those sort of things, sent him to other publications. He was the architect of the family separation plan, the Muslim ban, believes the 14th Amendment birthright provision is not enforceable. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to rate. Let me just say, of all the things that Trump has on his agenda, and obviously not all campaign promises or anything more than campaign promises, the fact that since the day he was elected, this has been discussed ad nauseum by his people almost every day. And Stephen Miller, when asked, when will this start, he says, on day one. This is one he really plans to do, don't you think?
Well, you know what I think, Jim? I think it's always bad when members of your own family feel pressed to come out and distance themselves, like the Kennedy family brothers and sisters. When RFK Jr. announced his run, they felt obliged to go meet Joe Biden in Washington and announce as a joint effort that they did not support Bobby with his weird kind of things with...
Dangerous, not weird. Dangerous policy prescriptions.
Well, I thought picking up the bear cub and
that was just weird.
in Central Park was a little weird. A lot of the things he's done.
You're talking about Steve Miller's family.
His uncle, who is a retired professor at BU right here in Boston. Yep. He actually wrote an op-ed in the Politico magazine. This is a while ago, talking about how horrified the family is. I've watched with dismay and increasing horror as my nephew, and he goes on and on and on, became the architect of all these horrible immigration policies since his own family fled anti-Semitism years ago when they came to the United States. So he thought he might be a little bit more sensitive to the flight of refugees, since his family was once a refugee, but I guess not.
Do you think people who voted for Donald Trump voted for this program? I would say yes, because it seems to me the two things that were most center stage were I'm going to fix the economy, and your pocketbook, your wallet, and mass deportation.
Well, I don't know if people actually, I would give the benefit of the doubt to a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump because they were upset about the influx of migrants in their towns and their neighborhoods. And
are they upset when they have food on their table that, for the most part, is produced by undocumented workers, when they go to a local business and the local business is staffed by, where is everybody says on the show, when we talk about this, well, the business community is going to be up in arms. When are they going to be up in arms? When are the economy, forget the humanity of this thing, the economy is so dependent on the work of undocumented people. And by the way, before you call and say, how about the criminals? As Mayor Wu said yesterday, every single person in this country thinks that serious criminal behavior, not crossing the border, serious criminal behavior apart from that, if you're here and undocumented and you're a criminal, you should be deported. Everybody agrees with that. That's not what we're talking about today. 877-301-8970. What are you laughing about?
Micah from Linz points out that unless you're a Native American, you're an immigrant here. He's thinking we should perhaps deport Trump and Elon Musk. And as people may know, Elon Musk was here illegally from South Africa. So I don't know what his citizenship status is now. Do you know?
Melania, there's an issue about Melania Trump, too. But I mean,
and her parents, the parents slipped in. But I guess if your husband is the president, you can get your parents into the United States pretty easily, right?
Before we get to calls and text, when you heard Homan say, of course there is, families can be deported together, that was one of the most chilling lines I've heard maybe in decades.
Well, there was a cruelty there.
Oh, my God.
There was a cruelty there. But, the other person that's going to be involved in the whole immigration thing is Kristi Noem.
Yeah, dog killer.
As we know, not only was he a dog, he was a puppy. He was only 14 months old.
It was a puppy?
Shot her puppy. Well, 14 months old, I say, it's borderline between a dog and a puppy. I say she's the
Department of Homeland Security.
I think before or after that, she also shot a goat. You have to watch out for Kristi. She's armed and ready to go.
You know what? One last thing. What? You keep mentioning the Dreamers.
The Dreamers are the worst.
Explain what you mean by the worst.
Well, Dreamers are grown-ups now who came here with their parents when they were infants, or they were 2 years old, or they were 4 years old. Their parents brought them to the United States. They've lived in the United States their whole lives. English was their first language in many cases. They've had an American upbringing, except for the fact that they cannot be American citizens. So the Dreamers, to me, is one of the most horrible things. They could possibly be shipped back to countries that they have no association. It'd be like you being shipped back to Russia, Jim. Isn't that where your family came from?
Somewhere in Eastern Europe.
Somewhere, yeah. You would. I mean, do you speak Russian? I don't think so.
Very well. Karandash, I think it means pencil.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Hey, one last thing before we go here. For those who have nothing to fear, which is, I assume, what we're going to hear, who are, for example, Latino, just as one example. We mentioned, I don't know who we were talking, we were talking to Mike Madrid about this the other day. How does an ICE officer know if they encounter people? I assume the color of your skin may have something to do with it. There's going to be a huge amount of fear engendered by people who theoretically have nothing to fear from the whole pall this casts over this country. Again, get rid of the criminals. Let's not even have that discussion. Get rid of the criminals, but maybe treat other human beings, particularly those who benefit this economy big time, with a decent amount of respect.
Well, he says mass deportation. It looks like he's really serious, given the people he's appointed to be in charge of this thing. I don't know. I'm hoping it's not going to be as mass as he says it is. I mean, the guy's been elected now. He doesn't have to worry about any of these going to jail and these criminal cases now. I mean, maybe he won't do what he says he's going to do, but I don't know. I mean, he might, and mass is a pretty big number.
Well, also, they talked about millions, by the way, which is well greater than the number, for example,
here's Miller.
of criminals. But wait, just
what?
One last, go ahead, say what you're going to say.
What Miller has said about what mass deportation is going to look at, he said this on CNN to Dana Bash. He said, you seal the border, no illegals, everyone there goes out. Then you'd establish these large-scale staging grounds for removal flights. So you would grab illegal immigrants and move them to staging grounds, and that's what the planes are waiting for federal law enforcement to move these illegals home, and you deputize the National Guard to carry out immigration enforcement. That's his vision. And I don't know.
Well, his vision is also separating kids from their families, because he was behind that in the first Trump administration. We should also say, in the spirit of fairness, The person who I believe in recent American history who deported more people in a year than any other was Barack Obama.
Right.
Even more than Trump in his first iteration in the White House. So we want to know what you think about this quote, his words, not ours, mass deportation plan of the second Trump administration.
You know, you hear this a lot about is the son of an immigrant married to an immigrant, slap in the face of those who came here legally. A lot of people, I think that's a misunderstanding too. You know, the Ellis Island thing was a late arrival. I mean, a lot of people's families came here not through Ellis Island, they just showed up. So there was a period in where Ellis Island was a big place you had to go through, and you had to have a sponsor and all that kind of stuff, but that is certainly not the whole picture of immigration to this country. A lot of people have relatives who came here illegally. Anyway,
Let's go to
Peter in Jamaica Plain. Hi, Peter.
Thanks. Welcome. Peter. Good start. Peter, we'll put you on hold. We'll come back to you. Hopefully you'll be paying attention. Hi, John in Groveland. How are you?
I'm all right, Jim. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for calling. What's up?
Let me ask you, since we're not going to talk about people who are criminals, let's talk about the people who've gone before a judge requesting amnesty, and the judge has said, no, you don't qualify, you have to leave.
That's probably the second tier.
Have chosen not to leave.
That's probably the second tier. Well, that's probably okay, depending on the circumstance. Not every circumstance is the same. But how many of those people are there? From what I read, maybe 500,000. He is talking. Every time I hear Steve Miller talk, he's talking about 11, 12 million people. So it's convenient to talk about criminals and people denied asylum, but that's not what they're talking about. That's what you're talking about, and it's not their plan.
You know, I'm a fairly regular listener. I started listening to you in 2016 because it's my desire to not agree with, but understand people.
I think that's great. I think it's great. Thank you.
But I just feel like you guys are just totally in denial. I just do. I feel like you looked at the election results and you say nothing to see here. You know?
By the way, John, I think we've said exactly the opposite, but I hope that you would agree if somebody was elected president and had a policy you disagreed with, I assume you're the kind of person who would say, I think it's a horrible policy, acknowledging the fact he's the president-elect of the United States. And I have to say, the thing that concerns me more than the details of your policy is the fear that's going to be planted in the minds of millions of adults and kids in this country because of a program that I at least think, and I know you and I have a different opinion, that is premised on cruelty, not on what I believe you believe is good policy. That's not a criticism of you, by the way. That's a criticism of the man who's the president-elect.
John, so I'm just curious, what do you think should be done?
I think first of all, deterrence is always a good idea. Much better to deter than to fight. But if we're going to have a policy, it's such a complex issue. Like you brought up the Dreamers a while ago.
Yep.
It's such a complex issue. But the previous or the current administration decided, and you know, in fairness, President Biden did campaign on this, that Trump was cruel and they were separating. So he did campaign on it.
Yeah.
But people have seen it, and the American voters have spoken. They want we need immigrants, but we want some orderly system where we have some idea who's coming in. And frankly, people who say, I'm skipping the line, that's what hurt the Democrats among Hispanic voters. People who did the right thing, who waited in line, filled out the paperwork, and now they're here, and they see these other people crossing the border, and they say, "What? I was a fool. Why did I do it the right way?"
John, it's an excellent call. We agree in part. We don't agree in other part. Please call us again, and thank you for your thoughts. We appreciate it.
But just to put this in perspective, one of the reasons people stopped waiting in line and doing it the right way because they were in totally desperate straits. And you try to, we can't have open borders, obviously, but you see what these people go through to get here, carrying children on their back through the jungle and through the desert, and people are dying and stuff. That's what pushes people, and I think the fallacy is that we think this is going to stop. I mean, John is right. With these harsh policies, immigrants may be deterred from coming here, but they're going to move elsewhere, because if you're can't get a job, or your family's starving, or the gangs are killing your relatives, or you can't get a living, you're going to go somewhere. And it may not be here for a while, but it's going to be somewhere because, and the climate refugees are going to become by the millions pretty soon too. Joe,
before you take Joe,
what?
I should have said this to the first caller, who was a good caller, and I hope he does call again. Do you think that there's anybody who supports the President-elect's policy on immigration who would not do exactly what they're decrying if their family was suffering horrible economic hardship or violence at home?
That's my point.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got to be totally desperate to get on some boat, it's overcrowded, some little crummy ship.
Walk 2,000 miles.
And come across and drown in the Mediterranean. I mean, remember at the beginning when Pope Francis first came in and he met all those migrants in Italy? So there's a desperation there. I think we're kind of fooling ourselves thinking that it's a worldwide problem. I mean, Europe is facing the same kind of problem. On the other hand, I can see where Joe is in Fall River. Let's take him first because Fall River flipped to Trump and voted for Republican the first time. What do you think, Joe?
Hi, Joe.
Hey, hi, guys. Hi, Marjorie. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
Well, I tell you, I mean, if we've become officially a fascist nation where we're going to start corralling innocent people up and just willy-nilly deporting them. How many videos do we have to see of children who are just devastated by being separated from their parents that you've seen on the YouTube and other channels that are just destroyed? We're going to destroy families in this country because this guy's going to decide willy-nilly, and Steve Miller, that psychotic idiot, is going to jump the gun and start just randomly, pulling people off the street. This is absolute insanity. What we need is comprehensive immigration reform. There was a bill put before the Senate and the Congress before Trump got into office that both parties agreed on. It was bipartisan. If they would revisit that, I think there's a humane way that we can approach this problem.
Hey, Joe, we all learned that for the first time in 100 years since Calvin Coolidge, as Marjorie referenced, Fall River voted for the Republican for president.
What happened?
Did your fellow Fall Riverites, or whatever the term is, they voted for a man who was very out front about this being part of his agenda.
And the Latino population increased dramatically in Fall River, too.
So can I say here that they essentially support, majority of people in Fall River, is it fair to say, support this policy?
I don't think they do. I think that the economy and some of other Trump's fantasies, I think, drove a lot of that voting. But, I mean, I saw it firsthand where people were literally on corners campaigning for Trump. So I think, it was a calamity of errors. It was fielding a candidate that wasn't prepared in any shape, way, or form to take on the candidacy for the Democrats to begin with. And secondly, Trump had that popularity rating where he came in with that whole, the economy sucks message, and people jumped on the bandwagon. And that's how we end up in this
Joe,
debacle.
thanks for the call. We appreciate it. I repeat what I said earlier. It's a little hypocritical that everybody in America is fine to be depending upon the work of undocumented people in their food, in their hotels, cleaning their houses, whatever, but they're also fine to deport them and their families. I don't get how decent people subscribe to this.
One of the things I'm worried about is the press shutting down for these events if they do happen, because
what do you mean shutting down?
Well, I mean, reporters and photographers have been arrested at rallies. They have been arrested for. They could make it really difficult for cameramen and photographers and reporters to get in to witness what's going on at these things. They could keep them so far away that you won't be able to see what's going on. I worry about that a lot.
By the way, we have to take a break. Before we do, minutes ago, Joe Biden and Donald Trump met in the White House as part of a peaceful transfer of power. I don't think we need to remind people when the tables were reversed, when Joe Biden was the president-elect and the president was Donald Trump. I don't believe such a meeting happened.
One of the best moments of all was when Trump thought he was in a little trouble in Pennsylvania. Remember, he was tweeting out about the massive voter fraud, True Social, massive voter fraud, and oh my God, like we've never seen, everything is like we've never seen before, like we've never seen before, like we've never seen before. But you know what? It's disappeared, and it's just sort of funny that there's not going to be the investigation into massive voter fraud in Pennsylvania. But anyway, we're talking about what people expected when they voted for Donald Trump vis-a-vis his pledges of mass deportation. If you're a Trump person, is this what you want? What do you mean by deportation? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
If you live in South Africa, your doctor's office might be on a train. There's a clinic on wheels that travels to the country's rural communities, offering services from optometry to cancer treatments to therapy. I'm Carolyn Beeler. That story and the latest international news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Tools of the Mind, offering a bite of tools, professional development workshops empowering pre-K and kindergarten teachers with actionable strategies to propel children's self-regulation development. More at toolsofthemind.org. And Dover Rug and Home, rugs and carpeting for today's lifestyle with in-home rug trial and design consultation. Dover Rug in Natick, Boston, Burlington, and online at doverrug.com. Dover Rug, rugs and the people who know them.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie Egan. We're streaming, we're at the Boston Public Library live and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock, we are joined by the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court, Margaret Marshall, to talk about all things judicial and the state of the country, her time in South Africa as a kid. Our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970. And again, Marjorie reads some of those texts right for the 1 o'clock news. How do you feel about Doge? Co-head of Trump's newly established Department of Government Efficiency is Elon Musk. Elon Musk being called that annoying house guest in Mar-a-Lago by a lot of Trump's friends, by the way. But how do you feel about this new office, the Department of Government Efficiency, and how long do you really think this Trump-Musk bromance will last? If you just joined us, we're talking about Donald Trump's plan for mass deportation starting on day one, according to his aides like Homan and Steve Miller. 877-301-8970.
Jim, we have an important question from Peter in Mystic, Connecticut. He said, Marjorie was terrific last night with the great historian Heather Cox Richardson at the JFK Library. And Peter from Mystic wants to know how Jim's PowerPoint presentation went on the North Shore.
It was huge. It was huge. Actually, it was a fabulous thing on the anxiety generation. That would be young people and how they're affected by social media. And it was terrific. Thank you both for asking.
Listen to Paula from Hingham. This is a theory I haven't heard before. She wonders if mass deportation is simply a cover for all the other crime Donald Trump is going to be doing while he's in office. He's getting everyone to look at this and not at all of his other possible nefarious future deeds.
Well, I mean, again, the guy campaigned on this. This is not some sort of surprise. You should believe him. When he campaigned on it, he picked two people who clearly subscribe to this notion that millions of people should be deported from this country. And as the first caller, who was excellent, said, Jim, you're in denial. We're not in denial. This is the program. But in a democracy, at least as of this moment, if you don't like a policy, if someone's in power, you are free, and I think have an obligation to say it. Al on the road. Hey.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good.
To start the conversation, it's important to remember that we did have an immigration policy that Donald Trump deep six.
Of course.
Right.
But at this point, I say do it.
Meaning?
Let's do it. We need to reap what we sow. America needs to understand what they voted for, and explaining it to them isn't working. Trying to give them examples of it isn't working. Deport every single person that guy can get his hands on, and let's see the havoc that ensues.
You know, let me just tell you, Al, I know you from the phone pretty well through the years. In the abstract, that's a nice notion if you're not one of those families. And so...
I'm very upset by this. I'm not...
I understand. No, I know the kind of person you are. And in many ways, my attitude is give them what they want kind of thing, but not when it means there's going to be the kind of human suffering and pain for people who happen to be, in most cases, exactly like us, but we didn't have to live in a place where they were scared of violence and economic deprivation. So, Al, we appreciate your point of view, though. Thank you very much for the call. I think people are going to get what they voted for because I think he has every intention of moving ahead on this.
Here's Karen from Minneapolis. She'd been thinking about being one of these families of undocumented workers. What the workers have had to teach their children because of the situation of being undocumented is to lie and be deceitful and be a little cagey about what's going on in your family. She says especially these children having to learn this dishonesty and to live in fear. And they've had to endure this for as long as they've been here. And Karen is hoping that we can change our legal immigration system and try to assist these families living in fear to trust again in the United States.
I mean, that is about, everybody says the exact same thing, that we need comprehensive immigration reform. By the way, who was the leader of comprehensive immigration reform? The soon-to-be Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio. That was before he was not for it. And as Al said a minute ago, there was a plan that many people considered fairly draconian that Biden signed on for Oklahoma Senator Lankford, who's a rock-ribbed Republican in the Senate, and Trump said, don't vote for it. And they didn't vote for it because he didn't want to lose a campaign issue. We should share with people, I think, a positive sign. Mayor Wu was with us yesterday, and we asked her, Boston is a sanctuary city, we asked her to respond to this whole promise of mass deportation and how it might affect people who live here in Boston. Here's Mayor Wu.
The idea that certain local law enforcement agencies will be required or will be expected to participate in mass deportations of residents who have not been part of serious criminal activity just to fulfill this campaign promise. This is not something that is possible under the laws in Boston. We're going to be working very closely with those who will know best and how to manage for every bit of scenario planning in this instance. Some of what has been promised does rely on having the full cooperation of local agencies.
And her point is they will not get it here. Bill and Newton, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Well, thank you.
I voted for Trump on a couple of things. Not that I was a huge Trump person, but on immigration, I think that you should deport illegal people. I think that people do it the right way, shouldn't be put behind. Also, student loans being paid by Joe Biden. I don't know anybody that has taken out student loans and paid them back and had their children take out student loans and make decisions. That is for that the government should be paying student loans. So now I'm paying somebody else's student loans as well.
By the way,
I don't understand
sorry. A lot of people I know feel the same way on the student loan thing if they've paid their own way. But getting back to your first thing, you say, first of all, they're not illegal. They've come to the country undocumented. But nevertheless, when you say they should be deported, does that mean that if Trump could figure out how to do it, all 11, 12, whatever number of million, Bill, should be deported?
Depending on what they're here, and I don't know the immigration rules, but if somebody's here illegally, you highlight that it's good for the economy.
I do.
I'm going to highlight what it's costing, $1 billion, Jim. What is it costing school children in Chelsea that now have more and more kids that don't speak English in their classes?
Well, actually,
you highlight the only positive. You're not highlighting any negative. As you see hotels full of immigrants, what is that costing? We're feeding them, clothing them, housing them.
Well, that has been, by the way, you're accurate in terms of the situation in Massachusetts, and you're right, in fairness, that should be accentuated. But the flip side, I hope you'll acknowledge that the overall economy of the United States, and let me say it as strongly as I can, is dependent on the service of undocumented people, or else a number of industries that you, Bill, Marjorie, and I are dependent would collapse.
But see,
I assume you agree with that.
I believe in legal immigration, Jim, not illegal immigration.
Got it. We appreciate it, Bill.
But here's one of the things. When people like Bernie Sanders says that the Democrats have lost track of the working class, you saw this in Boston, and Healy having trouble, the cost of helping people. They shut down the Melnia Cass Recreation Center in Roxbury, which is already a struggling neighborhood. The kids there lost their programs so they could move in migrant families. I get they didn't have any place to live, but if we live like I do in Brookline or you live in Wellesley or a nice town, you're not seeing that impact. And you are seeing it in poor towns. So to me, if we're going to have 20 new kids, as Bill said, come into the Chelsea school system, Chelsea needs some help. They need money to hire teachers to teach those kids English. They need help, but that doesn't happen. So poor towns like my own city, Fall River, which voted for a Republican for the first time ever, that's part of the problem. You see these changes in working class neighborhoods, and I think that's something that maybe a lot of people who don't live in those neighborhoods don't understand.
Well, I think that's right. And by the way, part of what drives all that and causes the flip in places where you may not think there'd be this animus, for lack of a better expression, was the strategic brilliance, though cruelty, of people like Abbott and DeSantis shipping migrants to places like New York City, Boston, and things like that. So you make a good point, as did the caller.
And you look at those border towns that are most impacted by immigration down there. Almost all of them went for Trump because they're drowning in some sense from nobody helping them pay for all these added expenses.
So last thing is, do you think if Trump, and I mean this sincerely, brilliantly, didn't convince his sycophantic supporters in the Senate to kill a bill that they supported, that, as I say, was fairly draconian, signed on to by Joe Biden, do you think he would have won on this issue? I think not. I think it would have been seen as Joe Biden late in the game, but finally got it, and it might have changed the whole dynamic. But again, fairly brilliantly, Donald Trump scotched the whole damn thing.
Okay, up next, we're going to change the subject here. We're going to talk with Jared Bowen about what's going on in the arts world. We have a great movie review from him. What is it called, the movie, Jim?
I'm not telling you. Small things like these.
Thank you very much.
My
We're also
pleasure.
going to talk to him about political art in the second iteration of the Trump administration. Do we still need it? And if so, what should it be all about? Jared Bowen, GBH Executive Arts Editor, is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local news.
More and more buildings are looking to decarbonize.
We're making room for a state-of-the-art, high-pressure, high-temperature heat pump complex.
GBH News.
In this technology, the energy source is the temperature of the Charles River.
That's enough steam to supply enough heat to about 3 buildings the size of the Prudential Center.
And after they installed this first heat pump, they're planning on putting in 2 more.
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Brown University pre-college programs, where academically motivated high school students can experience college life, nurture their diverse interests, and make new friends. Applications for summer 2025 open January 15th. precollege.brown.edu. And Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Almost took a little nap there for a second. Welcome back to Boston. Just a quick cat nap kind of thing. I just woke up. Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. 1 o'clock, Supreme Judicial Court former Chief Justice Margaret Marshall will join us here at the library. Our text prompt of the day, 877-301-8970. How do you feel about the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, co-run by Elon Musk? Apparently, the game plan is to strip $1 to $2 trillion from government. How do you feel about it? And how long do you think the Trump-Musk bromance is going to last? 877-301-8970. We're joined now by GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He's the host of The Culture Show, which airs daily right here at 2 o'clock on GBH. Hello, Jared.
Hello, great to be with you both.
Hello.
And nice to see you, too.
Jared, so I'm dying to know what you think about Kat Rosenfield's piece in the Boston Globe. She's basically talking about political art in the first Trump administration that was too preachy, too pious. It was obnoxious and pointing fingers at everybody and scolding, and we should get rid of it. I think that was the essence of what she said.
Well, of course, there's all this hand-wringing now about the last 4 years and what people did or did not do to have a Democrat reelected in the White House or elected in the White House. And so she is looking at the role of artists. She describes herself as left-leaning in this piece and describes how the creative class, the filmmakers, the authors, the painters, the poets, all made art that was, I think she called it ideological piety.
Yes.
In terms of their intention. And I understand what she's saying, and I understand that this is also part of this pendulum that is now swinging, because there are so many artists acting as activists, a lot of them call themselves artivists, who were looking at our country and looking at the political divide and looking at what they saw as injustice, especially after the murder of George Floyd and how there was a major re-examination of society, and they put that art out into the world, and now you see the pendulum swinging back. And so she's making the argument that there was too much done, that there was too much hit over the head, that you had also examples of political correctness run amok, that you had Beyonce and Lizzo having lyrics that had to be reworked and re-edited in songs put back out into the world because they were quote-unquote politically incorrect. Or shows like Ted Lasso, which had been one thing, but then started, as she kind of describes it, having after-school special episodes to deal with society. So some of this I understand. I think some of the most effective art, especially in popular culture, has shown us a society without hitting us over the head with the lessons. We look at Norman Lear and what he did with All in the Family and Maude around abortion and race. You know, growing up, I remember what Will and Grace did with same-sex marriage and just being more familiar with gay people in your everyday lives because they were put into the everyday life situations. I think that if you go further back, Arthur Miller did this with Death of a Salesman and All My Sons. He put shows on Broadway that showed what the American family was like now. This was coming after the war, where people lost a lot of people, where the dynamics in the family home in the 1950s really changed. And so it wasn't hitting you over the head with lessons. That will still happen. There is absolutely still a place for that, but I think she's making the argument that maybe this isn't so effective. The last thing I'll point out is...
So don't look at it. When I read the piece, by the way, I said to Margaret I hated this. Margaret said I loved it. And I decided to say I loved it then, too. Because I really wasn't in the mood. I have to be honest. I wasn't in the mood.
You weren't in for dark.
Jim is grumpy today. He's crabby.
Go ahead. I'm not crabby. I just wasn't in the mood.
I've never heard you say that.
But don't you remember, I mean, the thing is, you have these uproars. Like, I was just looking it up to see when it was done. It was a while ago now, late 80s, early 90s, the Piss Christ thing, and it was a crucifix in a vat of urine, which really upset lots of people. But the idea then was, this is art, this is expressionism, this is a point of view. We don't want to be censoring anything. But when Beyonce used the word spaz in one of her songs, the you know what hit the fan. So I guess if it's good for the goose, it should be good for the gander. I think that's what her point in part is.
Yeah, and there's always going to be a place for both. But I do think that sometimes it can be more effective, again, when you're portraying something that is more familiar. And she makes the comparison about the two Joker films that were made by Todd Phillips. And one was more sort of situational. And the other, the most recent film, which I haven't seen, apparently hits you, again, over the head with its lessons. I will say something comparable, if you're going to say with the DC franchise, is I've been watching Penguin, which I think is a really fantastic show on Max right now. And it's ostensibly about the Penguin from the Batman franchise, although if you didn't know that, and other than the city being called Gotham, it doesn't feel character bookishy and whatnot. But I thought the third episode of that series was so much about the state of this country right now, but it was something that occurred to me after, as I was thinking about everything that played out. So it was just subtle ways of looking at how people relate and how people have exchanges. And that's not to say that we're not still going to have the piss Christ conversations, because artists are explaining things and seeing it through their eyes and doing it in provocative ways that'll have a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
But I think she's making the argument that people are tired. And what I was going to say before is I've heard a number of actors recently say, look, my job number one is to entertain, including Daniel Day Kim. We're going to talk about him in a second because he's in this show Yellowface on Broadway, which is very provocative. It's also very funny. We'll talk about that. But for a piece that could be overtly political and is looking at society, again, this actor said, my chief job, I saw him in the after curtain talk, is to entertain.
Okay, I hated it, I loved it, now it's giving me a headache. So let's move on. Enough of this piece.
I thought it was very thought-provoking.
It's very thought-provoking. Go ahead.
Very thought-provoking. Because we're
ahead.
entertaining, you know what I mean? That's,
go ahead.
That's our role here, Jim.
Next.
We have to exhale every now and again.
Okay, let's talk about this movie, which Small Things Like These, which I'm a little nervous about because of what it's about, the Mandolin Laundry. We have a little sound from this. This takes place over Christmas in 1985 when devoted father and coal merchant Bill Furlong, it's Cillian Murphy, isn't it?
Cillian Murphy,
yeah.
Yep.
He played Oppenheimer in that massive hit that won all the
Academy Award,
Academy Awards last year. Anyways, the same guy. He discovers startling secrets kept by the convent in his town and truths about his own past. Here's a clip of Furlong getting questioned by his daughters about what he received from Santa Claus as a boy.
Daddy, did Santa ever come to you when you were a little kid? Daddy, did Santa ever bring you anything when you were a little kid?
He did, of course, yeah. He one year he brought me a jigsaw puzzle.
Oh, hush. Only a jigsaw?
Yeah. I didn't want much.
So he was in one of the convents as a child?
No. So this is based on a novella by Claire Keegan, the Irish writer, and he plays Bill Furlong. This is set in 1985. It's just before Christmas. He's a coal merchant. So this is a very, very quiet, contemplative film. You heard that just in that scene. And what I think, let me explain that scene directly, is he is struggling as he's leading up to the holidays, and all of these childhood memories are coming back to him. So when he is with his own family, he's trying to be present to them, but he's being flooded with these memories. Part of the reason he's flooded with them is because as a coal merchant, he's driving his truck around, and he's somebody who looks at the ground a lot. But he arrives at the local convent and begins to understand by finding a woman in the coal bin, because she's tried to escape the convent, that there are abuses happening here. So this is one of the times where he looks up, and he has to reconcile how much he's going to do about that, because he's becoming more and more aware that there are bad things happening in this convent. And this, of course, is based on what we now know to be truth, that from the 1820s until about 1996, when this scandal blew open, there were horrible abuses perpetuated in the convents and in the Magdalene laundries by the Catholic Church. Children were killed, children were separated, people were abused. It was horrible. And so we see this character try to deal with all of this as his own memories of his own childhood come flooding back. He wasn't in a convent, but he had his own abuses by society. And this is Cillian Murphy, who is exceptional in this. And this is also the first time he's stepping out as a producer, so this is his project. He's teamed with a writer he's worked with before, a director he's worked with before, actors he's worked with before, so there's a great comfort in this. I just thought it was a really, really brilliant film. As you could hear from that clip, too, a masterful performance. Emily Watson plays the Mother Superior. There is one scene in this film that is so chilling, because she knows she has all the power in that convent. She knows she has all the power in that town because the Catholic Church still governs. And the way she gets inside his head is just incredible to watch these two skilled actors go back and forth.
Okay, may I ask you a question? If you cannot really, at this particular junction, sit through a film that is about the abuse of children in one of these Magdalene laundries or the abuse of young women, should you not see this at this point?
So keep in mind, we're seeing this from his perspective. So he is only seeing the aftermath. So there's not a lot we're actually seeing.
Okay.
We're with him in this entire journey.
Okay.
So he sees just a tiny little glimpse and then has to take that home to his family of 5 daughters and figure out how he's going to live with this. By the way, I'll tell you, here's a little secret about the Culture Show. Sometimes we have to pre-tape interviews. Cillian Murphy is on the show tomorrow.
Oh!
He's one of the actors I talked to. And
You're
you'll see.
kidding!
Yeah.
That's
what
fabulous.
A get.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And he's so lovely and as a human being too, but he is one of the people who's saying, now listen to the subject matter we just talked about. He was one of the people who said to me recently, my job is to entertain first. But this is a very special project to him. By the way, he also did it with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon because part of their new production company really putting artists first, he's teamed with them to do this.
By the way, if you can't do the whole film, Joni Mitchell wrote a brilliant song, Magdalene laundries,
Yes.
which is really
Yes.
underappreciated.
Yeah, it's
about
it's
this
so.
very
I mean,
subject.
it's so upsetting to think
chilling.
about. That's why I asked you. So it will not be.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
All right,
Then
we're
I
talking to
can
Jared
go.
Bowen.
Yes, you can. And you
We got to
should.
step up the pace here if we're going to get to everything. You saw Our Town in New York City, correct?
Yeah.
I performed in Our Town in high school.
Did you?
I was the latter, actually. No, actually, I was not. I have no idea what I was, but I was in the cast. But how was it? I mean, it's been done a million times, right?
But this is terrific.
It is?
It's really terrific.
I love this play.
I love this play too, and I think what occurred to me when I saw this in New York is the fact that you can see something and know something all your life, and I think a lot of us do because you read it in high school, or it's performed in high school, or even grade school, and at different stages of your life you enter into it. So it's been probably 10 years since I've seen it. Okay, it's fine. It's about a New England town in 1901. By the way, it's set just north in Peterborough, New Hampshire. That's what it's actually. It's Grover's Corners, but it was set in Peterborough, New Hampshire. That was the inspiration for Thornton Wilder. And we meet the stage manager. In this case, it's played by Jim Parsons, and he's introducing us to the town. The garden is here. The farm is there. The church is over there. This is this couple. These are their children. Fine, we're moving along. The first act is all about daily life, and then we move into love and marriage. And then this is when I realize that everything has changed, because the last scene, the whole third act essentially is set at a cemetery, which I had forgotten because it wasn't as resonant to me. But the third act becomes all about loss and looking back at time. And I didn't also realize all the time cues in this, how many references there are to geology and the way that we move through life, again, through the prism of this little town and the exchanges. And the third act is quite brilliant because one of the characters has the opportunity after she has died. She wants to go back and relive one day of her life. And everybody else in the cemetery is saying, don't do it, you don't want to go there. And she does it anyway. And it just becomes so impactful and so searing. Kenny Leon, a great director who's also done stuff here at the Huntington, directs this piece. Katie Holmes is in it. Richard Thomas is in it, in addition to Jim Parsons.
Wow, what a cast.
They have, at one point I looked up, I had an aisle seat, and Katie Holmes is right next to me. They have actors coming in and out of the theater, so it's like you're in a town hall. It's
Tom
so
Cruise's
moving.
ex, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, there's a great Richard Hoffler writes this review in the I don't know where, the Rap. Listen to this. This latest Broadway revival of Our Town doesn't sink Wilder's reputation the way Lincoln Center's Theater's 2022 revival of The Skin of Our Teeth did. As I wrote in my review of that disastrous production, I hadn't seen that many people walk out during intermission since the Met Opera last performed so-and-so. He said, this guy's Our Town production solves this problem by not having an intermission, which is pretty... That's a pretty clever review.
I like intermission-free performances.
New York
It takes
City
too long.
till November 2024.
Also, bring your noses. They pump scents into the theater at different...
Are you old enough for Smell-O-Vision in the movies?
No, I know about it.
Do you remember Smell-O-Vision?
Bacon, bacon, bacon?
No. Huh?
You can smell the bacon.
You can smell something, yeah, in the movie
You can
theaters.
smell bacon in this theater, in this production.
You can?
Yeah.
Love bacon.
That's funny that you said that.
Isn't that weird?
And vanilla and heliotrope.
Lardon, I really like. How do you pronounce lardon, by the way?
I have no idea.
How do you pronounce lardon?
I've never heard the... Are you talking about lard, like fat?
No, isn't that that bacon, that like thicker... lard? No, whatever.
I don't know,
Okay.
Jim.
Sorry.
Sojourners is at the Huntington Theater.
Through December 1st.
Through December 1st.
Thank you.
So this kicks off a major cycle, which people may have heard about, a really exciting effort, speaking of the Huntington, launched by them, in which we will find a 9-play Ufot family cycle. And this is all the brainchild of Mfiniso Udofia, who grew up in Southbridge, went to Wellesley College, and her first play in this massive cycle that'll follow 100 years of a Nigerian-born matriarch, has opened at the Huntington, and the rest will unfold over 2 years. A whole bunch of partners. GBH is coming in as a partner too. Part of it is opera, part of it is folklore. But this first piece is a drama. And we are put in 1978 in Houston, and we have a young couple who's arrived from Nigeria. It's called Sojourners because they plan to be here for just a little while, have education, maybe start a family, and then take everything they've learned to go home to their family. However, When they arrive, the main character, Abisama, her husband has realized he really likes America. He really likes to listen to Motown. He loves to listen to Prince and eat pickles, and American life is really settling in well with him. Meanwhile, she's got her laser-like focus. I'm going to study. I'm going to return to Nigeria. She's pregnant. She's having a lot of difficulty adjusting because she can't necessarily call home. It's tough to reach her family. She doesn't know how to deal with her pregnancy when she doesn't have a lot of friends in this country, and her husband is slipping away from her. He's slipping into American culture, and he's not coming home a lot.
Oh,
and
no.
So we follow this kickoff of this cycle, and she is the matriarch whom we will be following over the 9-play cycle. But we see all of the challenges that she has in trying to integrate into the society, realizing that she is integrating actually, and she may not be returning home. We don't know because this is the first in the series. But it's quite compelling for the way we experience her life. And she meets a fellow Nigerian who just wants to support her. He's a man, so this becomes complicated. And she meets Moxie, a prostitute who has been abused, who also becomes a really dynamic friend. So it's this little circle that forms as she's trying to make her circle in the country larger.
And first of 9, is that what that is?
First of 9, yeah.
What happens when a plan like that is made? I know this is a big success, and one is not a success. Like we spoke to those people from Music Worcester, where they're doing like 100 Bach things.
That's right.
You know,
that
what if the
so
first
cool.
one doesn't work? I mean, you're sort of screwed.
Yeah, but I think they had confidence in the team they put together.
Okay, you only have a couple of minutes, but Yellowface on Broadway.
Yeah, we should talk about this because this this is so original in how it's done because the subject matter is pretty intense. So we find the playwright David Henry Wong, who is inserting himself into this piece because it's basically about his life. So it starts us off when he's winning the Tony for M. Butterfly and gets all of this acclaim. And then his second play, which was actually trying out here at the Colonial, is a complete flop.
Oh.
So I think they called it M. Turkey. It was horrible.
M. Turkey.
So
that's a pretty good line.
And he's reminding us of all of this himself, so he's very tongue-in-cheek about it. But at the same time, he also drew a huge amount of criticism, talk about the culture wars, because Miss Saigon at this time was coming from London to New York. And he looked at it and thought, well, wait a minute, how are you not casting Asian actors? And this is back in the 1990s, late 80s, early 1990s. How are you not casting Asian actors to be in Miss Saigon? Because Jonathan Pryce was set to star.
Right.
Huge backlash. Everybody tells him that this is not appropriate. I was really struck by this is one of the curtain talks I went to, that they pointed out white people could play anybody, but people of color still had to earn the right to play themselves. So this plays out in this play because he's engendering this controversy by pushing back. But then this is where this turns into farce because he's launching a new play and he hires what he thinks is an Asian actor. It turns out to be a white guy playing his lead role, and then he has to cover it up. So it's really, really funny. So again, as we were talking about before, we're talking about major political issues. However, he's put it in the context of this farce, and it's absolutely hilarious, but you spend a lot of time thinking about it afterwards.
I love Daniel Day Kim, by the way.
He
First
is
thing I ever
great.
saw him Lost, one of the great television shows of another generation kind of thing. Okay, I am modestly interested in what you're doing on the Culture Show today because I'm wildly interested in Killian tomorrow, so it's sort of distracting. But what are you doing today in the meantime?
We were talking to Carmen Fields about her dad.
Her dad?
Her dad, Ernie Fields, was one of the major band leaders.
I know that.
I
know that.
Coming
Oh,
up
my
out of
God.
Oklahoma and gave a start to a very young Marvin Gaye and some other
my
people
God.
in his band.
I didn't know that.
She's just written a book all about her father and those years and what it meant to
cool.
be traveling the country as a band leader and growing.
Mention her. I mean, people who are of a certain age don't know how important she was at GBH for a long time on the 10 o'clock news.
She was co-anchor, and then she wrote one of the, also about Oklahoma and the horrible
Tulsa.
massacre and resilience that came out of it.
We had
She
her on
wrote
about that. It was brilliant.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for American Experience.
Brilliant. It was brilliant. That's terrific. What else?
Yeah, and Amari Paris Jeffries joins us.
Oh, great. Terrific.
Talking about arts and culture after the election.
Say hi to Carmen. We're big fans.
Yeah,
I mean,
huge.
She is really wonderful.
Okay, we have been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, host of The Culture Show, which airs daily right after 2 o'clock. Thank you, Jared. Coming up after the new news, we're going to talk about national security implications of Trump's cabinet appointments with Juliette Kayyem from Harvard. We're going to talk, of course, about the puppy killer, Kristi Noem, the rather troubled Stephen Miller and a Fox and Friends host. He's going to
now
be
defense secretary.
as defense secretary.
God.
But, he's been doing a morning TV show.
More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Burton's Grill and Bar, featuring contemporary American cuisine, with signature dishes such as crab-crusted haddock, superfood salad, Mediterranean chicken risotto, and the Max Burger. Burton'sGrill.com. Humans are the most innovative species on Earth. On the next Nova, see how engineers are supercharging our abilities and altering our environment. Watch Building Stuff. Boost it. Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy.
In Everett, our text prompt of the day, co-head of Trump's newly established Department of Government Efficiency is Elon Musk. Is he the annoying house guest that just won't go away? He refuses to leave Mar-a-Lago, and how do you feel about his new office? Plus, the former Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, Margaret Marshall. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Against the backdrop of a burning fireplace, President Biden welcomed President-elect Trump back to the White House today. They exchanged a friendly handshake in front of the media cameras, signaling the start of a smooth transition.
Looking forward to having, like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate very much a transition that's so smooth. It'll be as smooth as it can get.
Biden pledged his administration would work with Trump's team to ensure a smooth transfer of power come January. The moment marked a stark contrast from the contentious handover after Trump strongly disputed his loss to Biden in 2020 and continued to do so during his recent presidential campaign. Trump's selections for his cabinet and other key positions reflect those who supported him. NPR's Sarah McCammon reports presidential historians say Trump is rewarding his allies as he forms his new administration.
Trump has made some unexpected choices, including selecting Fox News host and Army National Guard veteran Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. But Leah Wright-Rigueur, who's a historian at Johns Hopkins, says defense secretaries typically come from the ranks of high-ranking career military officials.
Are we surprised that someone who cut his teeth as a businessman and as a reality TV star would appoint a veteran that is also a television star to a high-ranking position? I don't think anyone should be surprised by that.
Hegseth served tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. Sarah McCammon, NPR News.
A former U.S. government employee is facing federal charges for allegedly leaking classified documents related to Israeli plans to attack Iran. Court papers indicate the defendant was arrested yesterday in Cambodia. NPR's Ryan Lucas reports the suspect is in U.S. custody and expected to make an initial court appearance Thursday in Guam.
Asif William Rahman was indicted last week in federal court in Virginia on 2 counts of willful retention and transmission of national defense information. Court papers say he held top secret security clearance. They don't specify which U.S. government agency employed Rahman, but a source tells NPR he worked for the CIA. The charges against him relate to secret documents prepared by the U.S. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency about Israeli preparations to attack Iran. At the time, Israel's intention to conduct military strikes was well known, and it did later hit Iran with airstrikes. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro.
The Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has told places of worship in southeastern Mass and Rhode Island to increase their security. The Sun Chronicle says the warning comes in the aftermath of 3 suspicious fires over the past 6 months at churches in that region. ATF officials say while there's no specific threat, religious institutions should do what they can to enhance surveillance systems, restrict access to facilities, and raise awareness among parishioners. The Native Land Conservancy in Mashpee has received a gift of 33 acres of land in Kingston, Mass. from the Northeast Wilderness Trust. That's a regional land trust that's based in Vermont. That's according to a press release from the Conservancy. The newly donated lands represent a portion of the Wampanoag ancestral homelands and are also part of the Atlantic coastal pine barrens and habitat of many animal species. The 33 acres are part of a larger network of protected land in the area. That network includes the Conservancy's 32-acre Wampanoag Common Lands at Muddy Pond, which abuts the 322-acre Muddy Pond Wilderness Preserve. The Wampanoag Common Lands were donated to NLC by the Sheehan Family's Muddy Pond Trust on behalf of the Wampanoag people back in 2022. In sports, the Celtics are in Brooklyn tonight. In the forecast, sunny mid-40s today, clear low 30s overnight, sunny and mid-40s tomorrow, sun clouds and mid-50s on Friday. 45 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. He's Jim Browdy. I'm Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News at 1 o'clock. Former Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court Chief Justice Margaret Marshall is going to join us. I almost didn't get that out.
Can't wait.
Court Justice Margaret Marshall is going to be here, and she is one of the most soothing and brilliant people to listen to. Can't wait. Hi, Jim.
Hey there. Marjorie meant to say our text prompt of the day at 877-301-8970 is, how do you feel about the new Department of Government Efficiency? It's co-run by Elon Musk. I want to get your feelings about that. They said they're going to cut a couple of $1 trillion from the budget. And how long do you really think this Trump-Musk romance is going to last? Text us, 877-301-8970. We're joined now at the Boston Public Library by Juliette Kayyem, former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer at The Atlantic. Hello, Juliette.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out.
You know, before we get started, can I just do a current event thing if people didn't hear the news? There's a vote now that probably most people think, why do I care? The Republicans are going to have 53 votes in the Senate, obviously a pretty significant majority based on recent years. They're voting for who their Senate leader is. The only reason I bring it up is in the first round, Florida Senator Rick Scott was eliminated. And the reason I bring that up, so it's Texas, Cornyn, and South Dakota's Thune are in the finals. That's not the issue. The issue is virtually every MAGA person from RFK Jr. to Musk endorsed Scott.
Yeah.
Now, what we learned from this is all these senators who generally have been sycophantic, whenever Trump says jump, they say how high, they reject the MAGA candidate. Why do they do it? Because it's a secret ballot. They have the ability to vote their own conscience on an issue when Donald Trump won't know how they voted, so they can all say they voted for Trump's candidate. But when they have to do it in public, they quiver in his presence. I mean, it is embarrassing. Even if you love the new president to be his policies, it's embarrassing.
Okay, Jim, thank you very much.
Got it out of my system. Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, so you are our national security expert, Juliette. We've had a few unusual picks in the National Security Department. What do you think of the appointments so far?
Our new defense secretary is pretty.
Yeah,
he's a good-looking guy.
Yeah. He's the guy from
Does
Fox.
Does that say his name?
Well, I don't
Fox
know.
And Friends.
Fox and Friends
guy, Pete. I think I think he's the new Pete.
Yeah.
Okay, I was here last week right after the election thinking about how to process and contribute in all of this. None of these are a surprise. They are all consistent with his sort of, stated desire to have, only his people not necessarily qualified or with subject matter expertise enter these agencies. So a couple of, non-personality things. It's going to be one of the most powerful White Houses we've seen. There's going to be no star cabinet secretaries as far as they're going to be wackos, but it's not like all the oxygen and the policy are going to be coming from the White House, I think, in ways that we haven't seen before. So that's one thing. The other is just compare these appointments. So skip Biden and then look at the difference between Mattis and Pete. Pretty
Hegseth,
boy, yeah, thank you. And that to me is what's telling about what the second administration is going to be like. It's a trolling administration. Why would you pick someone so unqualified to run the Department of Defense? It's a vindictive appointment because he clearly is going in there to get rid of generals and other things.
What does that mean to get rid of generals? I mean, that he's going to fire the ones.
He says he wants to fire. He does. He says he wants to fire the chair.
It depends on what they have in terms. A lot is going to depend on whether rules for non-political appointees are going to change. That's something that Trump wants to do. They'll probably offer exits to some of the early exits. The way I think it's going to work, at least my talking to people, is military officials have a very targeted plan about their career. They start as soldiers and then they become XYZ, and then they become 1 stars and then 2 stars and then 3 stars and then 4 stars. And that's very important to them for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, everyone wants professional development. So what I think is going to happen is all these 1 and 2 stars are not going to be put up. And I think then you're just looking at your career kind of ending and peaking, and you can make $500,000 in salary alone, in the private sector. So I think part of this is going to be no options for less about firing and more for promotion. And then that promotion will lead to lots of people exiting, and then he appoints his own people.
But I guess what I'm wondering is, if they decide that they're going to use the military to do some of these mass deportations, and in the military, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not supposed to accede to an order you think is illegal.
Seth Moulton, a Marine, told us the other day you refuse the order.
Refuse the order.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. If you get a bunch of sycophants and people that are loyalists, are they going to say, I'm going to follow the order anyway? Or how does this impact us, I guess is what I'm asking.
One is it's going to be, do you have a leader of the Pentagon who understands and represents the Pentagon's interest in terms of the feasibility? I'm talking about war now. We'll get to domestic in a second. The Pentagon often is the more cautionary entity when it comes to, capability. Do you want to do X, Y, or Z and abroad? And so one of my worries, you just have sort of an unqualified and I'm just being descriptive, like not particularly smart person. It's not like someone who's coming out of a leadership role in the military. He was a soldier, and then he was a troller online, and then he was a Fox News host. Okay, this is a large federal agency. The one thing is it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. These people are so unqualified for their positions that there is one scarier scenario, right? Which is sycophants who are qualified. I sort of like this scenario better because I do think agencies know how to work around people.
Can I tell you, I have to say, I agree with you when it comes to Elise Stefanik at the UN, this Hegseth guy, and a whole bunch of other people. The one place where I'll disagree with you is the Secretary of State's going to be Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy.
He is.
And while he has flipped his positions, as almost everybody in Trump's orbit has done, from when you have little hands, remember, for the debate, and you can't trust those kind of people, kind of a thing. And while he has, as I say, tailored his foreign policy positions more to Trump, for example, he used to be a huge advocate for adequate funding for Ukraine. He's less so now. He's a grown-up.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a grown-up, isn't he, as compared to some of the other people talking about? He's not like, I was worried Mr. Pillow was going to be Secretary of State, you know?
Yeah, he'll be Secretary of something.
Yeah, why hasn't he?
Well, we haven't.
Well,
We're not. We've still got
Secretary
DNI. We've got Treasury, DNI. We've got Justice. Maybe is he a lawyer?
He could be.
Justice.
That's right. He could be
You
the head of
probably
the
don't
DOJ.
need to be a lawyer to
Attorney
be the
General.
Yeah.
But how about Rubio's?
Rubio will be okay.
Yeah.
And I think people are a little bit calmer at the State Department because of that. But like you think it's like, I get all these texts and I'm just like, I don't know why everyone wants me to be outraged. I cannot do it. I will just describe to you what's happening.
Rage.
It's not even pacing at this stage. It's like, people are texting me about, oh my God, Kristi Noem is going to run DHS. That's where I used to work. What did you think? I mean, it's like, in other words, this is what it is going to look like. You can be outraged at it, or you can fight it and figure out ways to fight it. Once again, she is a nomination. This is a perfect example. She's a governor. She's qualified to run things.
John Thune, from South Dakota, who I would say is the most moderate of the three candidates for Senate president.
That's
was just
good.
elected the new GOP leader. In any case,
and also, I have to say, McConnell still got it. That's McConnell's deputy. Yes, that's his deputy.
Okay.
And so, think about DHS. So Homeland Security. So Thune is going to be, Noem will defer to the White House, which now has Stephen Miller, so on immigration, Stephen Miller, and now this new border czar, Homan, who had been head of the Customs and Border Protection. She's not going to have any opinion. She's what we would call the muscle, right? They're the brains, in terms of what the immigration enforcement's going to be. She'll just deliver CBP, Customs and Border Protection, and ICE and others, and then you'll see if the military does it. I want to be clear on this. The military use of the deportation of unlawful immigrants is not, in my mind, clearly illegal. You may not like it, but I want to be very careful over the next 4 years about what is preposterous, what is illegal, what is immoral, and what is just like stupid policy. They're all different, but look, if there's a bunch of unlawful immigrants being detained in a jail facility in New York City, you don't need the military. He may want to use the military to go say screw you to New York City.
So can we talk about, I mentioned Rubio a couple times. Let's talk about a couple of things that will be on the front burner.
Yeah.
Ukraine and Gaza.
Yeah.
So on Gaza, let's start there. In my opinion, the Biden administration has disgraced itself yet again. We set a deadline, which I believe is today, for a certain amount of humanitarian aid to be moving to Gaza. Israel has come nowhere near meeting our demand, and our response is we agree to give them more weaponry. So it was sort of like the red line of Barack Obama years ago.
Rinse, repeat. We've done that three times now.
In my opinion, absolutely disgraceful. Don't make a demand if you're not going to honor it. Having said that, it appears that the one area where Rubio is just as extreme as his new boss, Donald Trump, assuming he's confirmed, is his attitude is Netanyahu, finish the business. Just finish this thing, which I assume means do whatever you got to do until every single last Hamas terrorist is executed. Is that what we should expect?
That is right. I mean, these guys are so simplistic because, there's a variety of sort of currents going on, just to make it clear, because it's not just, it is Netanyahu and Trump agreeing to a very, very vague idea of what peace looks like. Remember, we still have the hostages, which sort of dismisses or ignores that there's 5 to 6 million Palestinians, and I'm not quite sure where we're putting them, right? So if you are planning,
you may have to put them nowhere because a lot of them are going to die.
Right,
not
exactly.
Only from weaponry,
that's exactly right. And so you're looking at that piece, but they're not all going to die. They're going to be immigrants. They're going to be radicalized. In other words, if you were thinking of long-term of Israel's security, the idea that you're going to replicate the displacement of Palestinians that brought on the creation of Israel and think that's good for Israel long-term, you're just living in Never Never Land. Like, you are just, people know my background, Arab America. I know how this story unfolds. I don't like it. I'm not defending it. I know how this story unfolds.
Well, and I don't mean to intentionally aggravate Biden-Harris fans here, but how is what Trump is proposing that dramatically different?
Well, they're
what
talking
we're
a
just doing
permanent.
today?
They're talking about. I mean, they're talking differently about sort of a permanent status in Gaza. All the stuff about the settlements and everything.
Well, no two-state solution.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the immediate future of people who are starving, seeing their whole families executed.
One current to watch in this that I just think is interesting since Trump has become president is the Iranian-Saudi Arabia nexus, which we've always not followed as much. So Saudi Arabia is just a complicated country in all of this. Obviously, wanted Trump or supportive of Trump, but the Saudi Crown Prince came out yesterday. The first time I've ever heard a Gulf leader say this, or him say this in Saudi Arabia, calling what Israel is doing a genocide. That language, he knows what it means, but that language is generally not used by leaders, especially those trying to get a deal. At the same time, Iran and Saudi Arabia had been sort of two balancing acts and quite competitive for sort of hegemony in the Arab world. Their alliance and their continuing alliance, which is just fascinating but not totally unexpected, it does not bode well for Israel, does not necessarily bode well for the United States, and is something to watch. And this is where the simplicity of sort of looking at the Middle East only through the lens of what Netanyahu is like, it acts as if Arabs have no interest. I'm not talking about Palestinians. Arab leaders have no interest. They have interest. For one, monarchs really like being monarchs. They are not going to permit lots of Arab unrest, lots of Palestinian unrest coming to their shores. Monarchs, one of the things about the Arab Spring that is not often noted is the survivors were the monarchs. There are ways in which they stay in power, and Saudi Arabia will continue to do so.
Can we talk about the other major foreign policy thing, Ukraine? And again, Rubio, by the way, I'm getting texts from two friends of mine saying, how dare you say, they didn't say this way, say he's like a grown-up in the room. Well, to quote Barack Obama, elections have consequences. Yeah. Look at who Trump is picking. Compare them. Marco Rubio is a saner alternative
I mean, it's
to
in the
a lot of the other choices.
So the way to look at this is Trump 1, Trump 2, not Biden. You're not going to get your Biden person. You're not going to get whoever you want for secretary. So the Tillerson-Rubio thing, right? Tillerson was his first. It wasn't successful, but an adult ran Exxon or something. And
he's the one that called Trump
Rubio,
a moron.
Rubio,
not publicly, but privately.
And Rubio,
he's a moron.
Are sort of in their space, right? John Kelly, the first Secretary of Homeland Security in the first term, had been had led the general command for basically South America and Mexico. He understood the homeland. Now you have Nomu, who's in a state that doesn't have a border, doesn't have doesn't have the cyber issues that we worry about in Homeland Security. But
the plus side, because you have to be hopeful. She is less likely she'll be killing any dogs in South Dakota.
I think that's
she'll
right.
be in Washington. By the way, one of our colleagues said that Mr. Pillow could be Secretary of the Interior Design. That's actually
There you go.
Okay, back to Ukraine. Now, as I said before, my understanding is Rubio was a fervent supporter of democracy in Ukraine. Let's fund him. And the closer he got to realizing Donald Trump had a good chance to be president and he might have a job there, he is sort of aligned with Donald Trump. And of course, as we know, he can solve this in a day. He allegedly spoke to Putin. Putin denies that he's ever said that he's spoken to Donald Trump, which, who cares? What is likely to happen right away in terms of Ukraine?
I will say Thune is a supporter, I think, of Ukraine. I think
that's right, actually, too.
So
that's a very good
interesting.
Point.
So look, you got to get the Senate to agree, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
but here's what I wonder. He's not going to run again, and you do wonder where that fits into all this too.
You ever hear him say last election, Marjorie?
Yeah, you know what he said
last
today, though?
election?
No,
doesn't need to be another election.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is,
quote the Times, believe him.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but we just had the first instance of with the secret ballot, and that is true, them bucking.
Well, he did say
him.
he met with the House today. He took Elon with him. I always think, like, not only is it weird that Elon Musk is always with him, I was like, where's J.D. Vance? Have you seen J.D. Vance?
No, I've said that.
It's like the weirdest thing, but everything was weird. But he said to the House this morning, this is my last go around unless you really, really like me, and then we'll talk. That's just talk. I'm gonna try to not focus on every outrageous thing he says. But look, the challenge of the next 4 years is what's hanging over us is also 2028, right? Is does he leave without violence?
I care about 2025. What's going to happen in Ukraine with Rubio as Secretary of State?
I think Rubio. I actually think there's two things going on. One is Ukraine is kicking some serious butt over there, and so the Europeans are rallying again. It's going to be hard to abandon them right now. Look, if Russia were entering Ukraine more and more, Putin is using North Koreans who are getting distracted because they now have access to porn. This is not the war. These are not the soldiers you want, right? I mean, it's one of the you didn't know that.
Where they want their computers in the battlefield.
They have computers. They have access to the outside world, and so they've lost. They can't get these guys to focus.
Because there's no pornography in North Korea.
Right.
That is a great point. And they're about 19 years old.
Yeah.
You got a
So
great point
false
there.
flags or
it's
whatever
like when
it
they
is.
used to be able to watch porn at City Hall. That was the big joke. You're down there trying to renew your license.
Anyway.
Let me try a third time.
Let me
try a third time.
What
What happens when Donald Trump says on January 22nd, I just spoke to Vladimir Putin. He has a wonderful idea. I'll bring peace to that part of the world. We leave the situation exactly where it is. Whatever's controlled by Russia, Russia keeps, which we know is totally unacceptable to Zelensky and the Ukrainians. And same with Ukraine. And Trump puts his imprimatur on that. What happens?
The Europeans, I don't. Step up
it's
to
just
the
like
plate
this is another thing where like whatever Trump says doesn't. I mean, once again, other people have interests. He's not Voldemort, right? And it's not just the Ukrainians and the Europeans. Your assumption on that, right, or the assumption, and this is what's so interesting to see what's happening with Russia. Once again, you just got to, view this with eyes wide open. The day after he becomes president, right? And Russia clearly had done a disinformation campaign. We also think the bomb threats during the election in Georgia and elsewhere were coming from Russia. They definitely had a play in this election. They supported Donald Trump. The day after, Russia state television starts publicizing and publishing Melania Trump's nude pictures.
I don't get. Can you explain that to me? I'm glad you brought it up.
Screw you. It is a. You think you're in charge? No, we're in charge. And whatever it is that relationship. Then Putin denies what the Trump White House clearly wanted out, which is that they told.
Very good analysis.
So this idea that there is a alliance, like either Putin's going to see that he has to follow Trump, or he's, I guess, let me go back. Putin doesn't feel a need to follow Trump. He doesn't need his acceptance. He doesn't need anything right now. He needs to do whatever he needs to do to keep in power.
I'm not worried about Putin following Trump. I'm worried about Trump following Putin. You don't think if those two guys met, Trump announces my first meeting in Geneva is going to be with Putin, and he becomes as lapdog-like as he was in Helsinki when he says, why would I not believe Vladimir Putin, even though all my intelligence leaders are telling me something else? He is so susceptible to praise from an autocrat.
How are you going to enforce it if the third part? Once again, other parties have agency.
You stop giving him a penny.
Okay, you start giving them.
You don't give $1 or any weaponry.
Let me just be clear here. Let me just be clear.
We have European nations who have a lot more skin in the game, and I can't imagine.
They have more skin in the game in terms of weaponry than we do.
Well, I think that they can roll up the money and
you're talking about.
I just don't think they're going to roll over if the United States rolls over and say, let them invade Poland. I mean, what do you think, Juliette?
I think the scenario where Zelensky says, sure, does not exist. And so Trump will realize that. I mean, he always does.
Right.
He will realize that.
You're right.
And look, I think Zelensky might do a deal where, he gives up this and they give that. I don't think a deal is impossible, but the assumption of what you're saying is the assumption that Putin is winning. he's not winning.
My
he's
assumption is that Trump is totally susceptible to praise by strong men. And if he's in a room with Vladimir Putin, what Vladimir Putin says, Donald Trump will do. That's.
I think. Yeah, but Zelensky also called Trump and kissed the ring. So we'll see where this falls. And Elon Musk seems susceptible to that as well. I mean, so I'm just, there are other parties with interest who are going to figure out ways to work around this. That includes cities and states, blue cities and states that are now figuring out ways, and it includes all of us.
I think the best news I've heard today is about the North Korean soldiers, 19 years old, and the porn. I think that's.
Did you know I Googled that to make sure
news.
she was right?
Yeah.
Not only is she right, it just says here, every single man in North Korea has volunteered to fight on the side of the Russians.
I rarely get porn news in my national security feed. Forgive me for enjoying it.
It was an avenue I hadn't considered, and I'm very excited about it now.
Give them porn.
It's good to see you, Juliette.
We have been speaking with Juliette Kayyem.
Thank you all.
Former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer at The Atlantic. Up next, a deal struck for the New England Revolution Stadium in Everett. We're going to talk with Shirley Leung about that, about the economic impacts here of the new Trump presidency, and about what the next Trump presidency and his big win means for the next mayoral race in Boston. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Latino evangelicals who support Donald Trump are pretty excited about the direction the president-elect is taking the country.
His understanding of how America should be according to the Constitution is based on Christian values. So that's where I'm going to aim towards.
What they hope he'll do in office on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Johnson & Wales University. From computer science to public health, students can develop professional networks and industry experience alongside their classroom education. More at jwu.edu. And Central Square Theater, presenting Galileo's Daughter, exploring the letters between Galileo and his daughter Maria Celeste and a story of faith, forgiveness, and the cost of speaking the truth. Begins November 14th. centralsquaretheater.org.
Welcome back. Oops, sorry, it's you.
Oh.
No, it's not. It's 12:30. Wait,
Okay.
What time is this?
It's 12:30, Jim.
Okay,
It's
thank
you.
you. Okay, I'm a little thrown
Ha
off
ha
here.
ha. I can get some mileage out of that one.
This is really a disaster for me. We're going to be hearing that for months, but I did it.
He did it.
Okay, let me do it again.
Yes, you
Welcome
did.
back to Boston Public Radio. I knew I was supposed to do that.
Uh-huh.
Live from the Boston Public Library. No, I didn't. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In 30 minutes, we're going to be joined by former Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court, Margaret Marshall, talking about a variety of things, including what concerns me most about the next 4 years, the Supreme Court of the United States. Our text prompt is on another subject, 877-301-8970. How do you feel about the new Department of Government Efficiency, co-run by Elon Musk? And a corollary question, how long do you really think the Trump-Musk bromance is going to last? We're joined now by Shirley Leung, business columnist of the Boston Globe, host of the Say More with Shirley Leung podcast. Hey, Shirley.
Hi, Jim. Hi,
Hey there.
Hey, Shirley, great to see you. So one of your colleagues, was this the Adrian Walker column? I think it was.
Yep, it was.
That was speculating about what the Donald Trump big win around the country and even here in Massachusetts, and increase support for him all across Boston, what it will mean for the chances of Josh Kraft, the son of Robert Kraft, longtime, people really liked him, ran the Boys Club for a long time, but there was talk about his running against Mayor Wu the next time around. So what is the impact of Trump's victory on Josh Kraft's mayoral run?
I mean, it seems that Adrian seems to suggest that he doesn't think it's bad for Josh Kraft.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been working on a bunch of us who've been following city politics. We knew as soon as the election was over, the presidential election, all eyes were turned to the mayoral race. You know, next year, 2025, Mayor Wu is up for re-election, and we've known for a long time Josh Kraft has been looking at whether to run. I have a slightly different conclusion from.
Do tell.
I actually think the Trump's return really creates an opening for Josh Kraft because it signals to right now I think the lane is wider for a moderate Democrat. And now I know those who think, and I think Adrian would agree, that that last time when Trump was in office, it united the Democrats here. You know, we saw Maura Healey straight out of the gate, saying, I don't agree with these Muslim travel bans. You saw her, fighting and suing the federal government to protect reproductive rights. You saw Marty Walsh, then mayor, stand up and say, I'm a supporter of sanctuary cities. But will we have the same reaction this time? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it does feel like a new America, a new Boston. I mean, there's a clear rightward shift. I mean, yes, Kamala Harris won by a lot.
Do we know where Josh Kraft stands on bike lanes?
That is... Well, that would be probably question number one, right?
I mean, nothing gets people more riled up than bike lane talk.
But you can see Josh Kraft, who is a Democrat and who would, of course, run as a Democrat, a moderate Democrat.
You don't run as a Democrat or Republican in Boston anyway. You just run.
Run. And but you could see that this election was a rejection of the progressive ideals that we in Massachusetts are known for. And so you can see him. I think he's been kind of back on the fence. You can see this. Pushing him towards running because he wants to ride this moment. If you think about how Trump won, he tapped into, this, identity politics. People didn't care as much about as identity politics. They cared about pocketbook issues. You can see Josh Kraft leaning into that. You can see him knitting kind of an unusual coalition, like Trump did. He got the majority of white women. He got majority of Latino men. You can see Josh Kraft carving this path where he's knitting together the black community, which he's been in for many years from the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
You can see him then appealing to the business community, to liberals in Back Bay and South End who do not like bike lanes, or to a more conservative vote in West Roxbury and parts of Dorchester.
Yeah.
So you can see.
And South Boston was big for Trump.
Yeah, yes. Can I just say something? You said before this rejection of progressive values, and let's assume that you're right just for argument's sake. I don't buy that in this state at all. Yes, 4% more of the people voted for Trump. Yes, 48,000 more votes. It was still an overwhelming victory for Democrats. I mean, they lost Fall River, and that's, I'm not minimizing the impact of that. But this still, I mean, look at Elizabeth Warren. John Deaton, very decent guy, I think a very credible candidate, crushed by Elizabeth Warren.
But Deaton did better than Deal, though.
Yeah, but better, and getting crushed is not exactly a rejection of progressive ideas. The second thing I should say, I don't know Josh Kraft that well. I do know of his work, and I am share with every person I've ever spoken to about the Boys and Girls Club has said incredibly wonderful things about him. Comparing them, other than the fact they're two white guys, to me, just doesn't carry. I mean, he has dedicated his life to helping low-income people in this community, either at the Kraft Family Foundation, whatever it's called, or at the Boys and Girls Club. Donald Trump has dedicated his life to helping no poor people. So, I mean, they're different characters. But the other thing I should say is it's sort of, Mayor Wu is a really skillful politician.
She is.
We're acting as if because the business community is upset because of this. She is a really skillful politician. And the notion...
Well, you know what she's got, too? I mean, she's like Charlie Baker. She has got an enormous brain. I mean, there's nothing you ask her about that she can't give you an answer. Here she is, mother of two, about to have a third kid. I mean, knows everything about everything. Remember we used to ask Baker a question? There wasn't a comma he didn't know about it. And she's the same way.
Yes. I mean, she is also the incumbent, and it's very hard to unseat an incumbent.
Well, especially when you support the challenger and you lose, the business community thinks it's on the outs now. Wait till we'll see what happens if they pick the wrong horse.
The reason why that doesn't matter is because they feel like parts of the business community feels like they have nothing to lose.
Maybe, yeah.
And so that's why it's a little bit different calculus this
time. My
time.
prediction, unopposed. That's I have no inside information. I don't think Josh Kraft's going to run. I don't think Ed Flynn is going to run.
I think Ed Flynn would jump in if Josh Kraft doesn't.
You think? Well, maybe so. We'll continue to follow it. And obviously, formally, Mayor Wu is not declared, but she's...
Oh, she has declared.
Oh, she did? I missed that. When she declared?
When she announced that she's having a third child.
Oh, I missed that. What'd she say?
She said, I'm also running for re-election.
Oh, I thought she said she hadn't.
But she hasn't formally announced, but she doesn't need to. I mean, because the reason why she had to, she said, I'm expecting my third child in January, and oh, by the way, I'm still running for re-election.
How'd you like to be mayor of a major American city and have 3 kids, one of whom is like a day old? I mean, boy, talk about...
Well, her husband gave up his job, and he's taking care of the kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful example, too.
Yes.
That she's got the big job. I'm sure she's not always going to be mayor, and he'll get his turn later to go back.
She'll figure it out.
Can I just say one more thing, by the way? Assuming I'm wrong and Josh Kraft does run, how heartening is it to have 2 young, if they both run, smart, committed people dueling to be the leader of your city, regardless of which side you're on? I mean, it sort of harkens back to me, the Welds and the Currys and all those races when 2 grown-ups who are caring people decide they want a job.
And I think it's better for the city to also challenge the incumbent, right? To have a discussion. What's gone right? What could have been done better?
Real debate.
So what is the Trump presidency going to mean for the economy around here? What are people talking about?
I mean, I think it's a bit mixed, you know. You think about how Massachusetts has benefited under a Biden administration, an administration that believes in science, that believes in climate tech, and we are also a huge beneficiary in Massachusetts of NIH grants.
Yes, that's a great point.
So there is a lot. Also higher education, right? And we are the ground zero for so many universities and colleges, and we know that Trump has said that he wants to start taxing the endowments. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean,
and if you do DEI in any form, you could lose your federal funding.
Right, and so right now, our economy has actually been very strong and resilient post-pandemic. So there's a lot of uncertainty looking ahead. In immigration, I mean, we already have a huge labor shortage here.
Yeah.
And if more people are deported, that's going to further impact the ability of companies to hire here.
Speaking of the economy, economic development bill, the legislature, which is in the midst of its 5-month vacation, is about to come back for a formal session, which means they only have to win a majority of votes to, I don't know, on a bonding issue, maybe it's a supermajority.
Would they lose that on it by 71 to something? What was the final outcome of
the question 1 you're talking about?
It was like a landslide.
Like 70-30. Yeah. So this economic development bill is allegedly going to be voted on tomorrow, and it sounds like it has a lot of good things, and I want to talk about one thing maybe not so good. I don't know if you deal with these people. Are any state reps concerned that they're going to get a bill, I assume last night or this morning, for a mere, how much money is this thing?
Almost $4 billion.
$4 billion, and they get it a day before or a day and a quarter before they're supposed to vote on this, when the message from the boss is vote yes? I mean, do they care, or...
They probably do. They're not going to say it out loud,
no, of course,
right?
Which is, one of the things, I just want to say, there are a lot of good things here. We can talk about if you think it's a good thing, the Rev Stadium in Everett is Bruce Marks, who I think is one of the most innovative housing people in the country, based here, but does homeownership stuff all around the country with NACA. Talked to us when he was here about this Blue Hub, this organization that does these shared appreciation mortgages. When you're about to be foreclosed, they buy the thing, sell it back, but then they share in the appreciation. He says it's a real serious problem. Some people disagree. He thinks that individual homeowners often lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. We asked the Attorney General about it. She said she was troubled by it too. Well, lo and behold, according to Bruce, an amendment was slipped into the economic development bill that does the following. It provides immunity, no penalties for any consumer violation for the following: a nonprofit 901c3 that does shared mortgages. Now, that may apply to a lot of places, except Bruce says there's only one nonprofit 901c3 that does share mortgages. It's Blue Hub. So my assumption is that, again, tomorrow, for those, whether it's a good or bad idea, he thinks it's as bad as it could get, and I think the Attorney General, from what I remember, agrees with him. They're going to vote on this thing tomorrow. How many of the 200 legislators do you think know that this amendment is salted away, I think with no notice in this bill?
I mean, there are probably a lot of line items like that, right? And this is why we don't like it when these kinds of bills are done at the last minute, and everybody has to agree. You've got to think that there were a lot of backroom agreements made in the last few weeks.
And it's almost as if, in light of the fact that the final deal was cut after people voted last week, and as Marjorie said, voted 70 to 30. I don't think people were voting, I want to make sure this portion of the legislature. It was a statement to the legislature.
Shot across the bow,
and their
Jim,
response
that's what I call it.
to the lack of transparency, the lack of a democratic process up there, is to engage in more of the same. Even if 90% of this is good, and I assume it is, it's amazing that there's no impact, apparently, on their behavior.
There has to be an economic development bill passed. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, from soccer to climate tech, and so. But yeah, there will probably be. You got in this situation, because it's the way it's being done. There'll be some bad. I mean, we got to.
So why don't they? If it turns out that they cared about legislators actually knowing what they're voting on, instead of giving, I think it's 2 days notice, why don't they announce the vote's going to be next Thursday? So you have 9 days with your staff to look at it. Well, exactly, but why don't they? Because the secret deals will be no more secret, right?
And also, they need a lot of people to say yes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so they haven't really changed the way they do business up there. But
that was my point. Yes, I didn't get to it. Yeah. So the Rev Stadium, apparently Mayor Wu, who had a problem before because she wasn't consulted, there's now a provision that if she's not happy with the end game and the community benefits, there's some arbitration. So there will be a Revolution Stadium in Everett?
It sounds like it. I mean, I think it's great that there's a community host agreement in the legislation. I think that's one way to get around some of the tensions between Everett and Mayor of Boston. And Mayor Wu put a statement out too. And I think, it's kind of silly. I mean, how long has the Crafts been looking for a soccer stadium? Has it been 20 years?
A long time.
Probably a dozen.
And you don't want to go to Gillette. I've been to a couple of games down there. It looks so ridiculous.
You've gone to Revolution games?
Yeah, because the kids like to go to the soccer games, but it looks ridiculous because there's not nearly as many fans, obviously. So you have this huge stadium and this little small section. It's not good.
I mean, and also they put in the bill that there can be no public money towards construction of the stadium.
Just infrastructure.
Just for infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
I think these are good guardrails to put in there.
So, Shirley, we're going to ask our...
No, before we leave this, can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
I want to be clear about this so I don't get all these angry emails. From what I read, only in the Globe, it's all I know about it, there are a ton of good things here.
There are.
To me, that's a secondary issue. The primary issue is transparency and democracy.
Agreed.
If there's such good things, give elected officials enough time to read the damn bill before they vote on a $4 billion piece of legislation. And before you get to Musk, one last thing quickly here. You know what I forgot when we were talking about the economy here and the Trump's ascension? I have not heard a word, maybe I missed this, like I missed Wu's announcement that you mentioned a minute ago. Is Healy worried that the hundreds of millions of dollars for the 2 Cape bridges might disappear?
Oh, God, the bridges. That's
right. Do we know anything about this?
I mean, I think that's... I mean, I haven't...
I don't know.
I assume that...
How locked in is it?
Right,
I don't know.
I assume it's locked in. I think that's why they're rushing to make the announcements.
They're rushing to get a lot of the infrastructure money out. I think there's billions left.
I don't think you would announce it unless it's locked in. I mean, they've got to see... I would hope they saw that this is coming.
I would hope too.
So I think it's good that we've locked in whatever dollars
Donald Trump would never renege on the commitment, so we don't have to worry about that.
And I would expect Andrea Campbell, knowing her politics a little bit anyway, or quite a bit that anyway, that she'll be continuing a lot of those lawsuits that Maura
yes,
Healey
I think she will.
Engaged in when she was the Attorney
what also
General.
politically, politically, it was very good for Maura Healey.
It was.
To be in front of cameras and to always have a common enemy of Donald Trump. So I think Andrea Campbell will do the same.
So we're going to ask listeners up next about the Department of Government Efficiency, which is going to be co-run by Elon Musk. And we're just wondering what you make of Elon Musk. There have been jokes about how he refuses to leave Mar-a-Lago. What's he doing down there for so long? And how, these are two men of very large egos.
Yes.
I can't imagine that this partnership can last long without becoming combustible, but I could be wrong.
I mean, it's actually really very remarkable to see kind of Elon Musk's transformation, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, remember we were all making fun of him buying Twitter and how much he overpaid for it, but now it became such a mouthpiece for Trump and the election of Trump. Maybe it was a really good investment. It doesn't matter if he lost money on it, because now he's helped elect a president, and Donald Trump feels like he owes Elon Musk big time. I mean, I'm actually surprised the level of the level of involvement Musk, has been part of this transition for Trump, and I'm a little like. Donald Trump, maybe he may or may not get stuff done, but someone like Elon Musk, he actually might be very efficient and get things done.
The guy gets billions and billions and billions in contracts from the same government that he is now charged with making more efficient. I mean, why, even if he had a stellar reputation, why do we put someone who is so encumbered with conflicts in charge of making decisions about how the government should spend its money?
That's Donald Trump, right? He
Exactly,
is Mr. Conflict of Interest.
He is Mr.
It's like this makes sense in a Donald Trump universe. I'm not saying it's a good thing at all. I'm just saying I'm surprised that. I mean, I guess I'm saying Elon Musk had this like evil vision, and none of us saw it coming. And now, I mean, down to. He's probably one of the biggest contributors, right, to the pro.
He donated $175 million to a PAC for Trump that apparently was the primary funding mechanism for the canvassing effort that many people think outperformed the get out the vote of the Democratic Party. So he may be a huge contributor, I don't mean that as a pun, to the election of Donald Trump.
And then remember the $1 million giveaway?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I was like, sign up for this petition and we'll give you $1 million. It's incredible.
Well, I was telling Jim this morning, I didn't know this. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, The Daily from the New York Times, and apparently when Biden had the summit of all the big three automakers.
Yes, I heard about this.
They didn't include Elon Musk, Mr. Tesla.
Yep.
Jim has a Tesla, as we know.
Thank you, I do. I love my Tesla.
And he was really ticked off about that, and that was part of his transformation.
Yeah, that set him off.
Yeah, and really, Biden should have had him there. I mean,
he should have.
And also, you wonder how this fits in, because he's a climate guy.
Yeah.
And
well,
Trump
I would argue that Tesla, one of the most important contributors ever.
So do they ever discuss that,
climate.
or is it like with RFK that you can touch everything except the liquid gold, which is oil?
Right.
I don't know.
So, anyways,
that's what Trump calls
and the
oil.
thing is,
I'm more of that.
Just in case.
Thank you very much.
Pay attention.
So did the Beverly Hillbillies, by the way, if you remember.
They call it liquid gold?
I think they did, yes.
Oh, I love that
Something
show.
like
Remember that show? You're
Sorry,
too young
Shirley,
for that.
she's too young. What do you want to say before you go?
No. I was just going to say that Elon Musk, I mean, we're only aware of Elon Musk, as a billionaire, mucking around in the transition, but there's probably many more that we haven't even heard about.
Well, he's the father of 48 kids, so that's another thing we know about, or whatever.
No, not Elon Musk. I'm just saying there's probably a lot of
other people like it.
Yeah, there are probably other Elon Musks.
Mr. Pillow, for example.
And we just don't know about it. And the message to billionaires is, that Donald Trump is ready to wheel and deal in this second administration.
I know a few billionaires ain't so happy about what happened last Wednesday.
Jim knows a lot of billionaires.
I didn't say a lot. I shouldn't have said a lot. I knew that was going to happen. I know a couple.
Jim's traveling that rarefied air.
But not enough of them. Not enough of unhappy billionaires.
It's wonderful to see you as always.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thanks so much for your time.
We've been speaking with Shirley Leung. She's a business columnist for the Boston Globe and host of the great Say More podcast. Up next, our text prompt of the day. Text, that is. What do you make? We were talking just about this before. 4 of Trump's government efficiency plan, putting Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, in charge of slashing the federal government. What could go wrong, Jim? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Imari Paris-Jeffries, CEO and president of Embrace Boston, joins us for his reflections in the aftermath of an historic election. And a new biography chronicles the life and career of musician and band leader Ernie Fields, and what it was like as a black man to travel the country during the Jim Crow era. That's on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion, with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And We Clean Heat Pumps, serving the region with cleaning and maintenance of ductless mini-split heat pumps, helping to purify air and reduce mold, dust, and debris as fall approaches. More at WeCleanHeatPumps.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margaret Egan. We're live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In about 10 minutes, former Chief Justice of the state's highest court, Margaret Marshall, will join us for a lot of conversation, including about the future of what I think is the thing I'm most nervous about, namely the future of the Supreme Court of the United States. But it's time for our text prompt of the day. President-elect Trump has a concept, we've told you about this all day, of a plan for how to make the government work more efficiently. It's named after one of his leader's own meme cryptocurrency endeavor. That's right, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, will be co-led by Elon Musk, the apparent guest of Mar-a-Lago, who will never leave, say a lot of Trump's friends, and the other co-leader of this imaginary government, well, it won't be a government agency, apparently, Vivek Ramaswamy. Yeah. What could go wrong? Now, Marjorie, what are people saying? And more importantly, can you please explain to people Doge cryptocurrency?
I will, but I just want to point out that Vivek there not only wants to get rid of the Department of Education, he also wants to get rid of the IRS
and the FBI.
And the FBI.
Yes, he does.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
It is the correct name of this. What is this thing?
Department of Government Efficiency. Doge. Thank you.
Several of the texters are all pointing to the same thing. Let's start with Paula from North Kingston, Rhode Island, who said, perhaps an obvious question, why do we need two people heading up the efficiency department? John from Beverly.
She stole that, by the way, from Secretary Warren, who tweeted this, Senator Warren. The Office of Government Efficiency is off to a great start with split leadership. Two people to do the work of one. Yeah, that seems really efficient.
Well, that's what Chris from Boston says, too. Isn't it priceless that two people are announced to lead a Department of Government Efficiency? I started to quote the text from John from Beverly. However, that was about a different event.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this.
Reported high levels of cricket and stork sounds coming from
people don't know what you're talking
college last night. That's where Jim was doing a PowerPoint.
I wasn't doing a PowerPoint. College. I moderated a panel on the anxious generation last night in Beverly. Thank you.
And I guess there was a lot of snoring.
A lot of anxiety.
Who's from Beverly.
It was actually a fabulous panel. Thank
Sam
you.
from Fairhaven thinks there's a possibility here. She says politicians from both parties promise voters they will deal with the high cost of living. The United States government runs trillions-dollar deficits and a $35 trillion debt. I don't know, is that
who ran the biggest deficit in American history during his presidency? Donald Trump, correct.
But to all the politicians, says Sam from Fairhaven, start with lowering the cost of government. Let's give Dodge a try. So he's not that upset about it. However, Judy in Danvers thinks that Musk will efficiently destroy the government like he did Twitter. And Judy says she also loves that Stephen King has labeled Elon Musk the First Lady.
By the way, the proof that this relationship is not going to last long happened at Madison Square Garden at that grotesque pre-election rally. Listen to who the crowd was chanting about during the Trump rally the weekend before the election. First, you'll hear the voice of Elon Musk, and then you'll hear the crowd.
Now, you guys are awesome.
Honestly.
How much do you think Donald Trump liked that? The
Didn't like
crowd
it.
chanting the name of Elon Musk.
And if you saw, it wasn't there, or maybe it was there, but saw some picture of a rally with Elon next to Trump, and Trump is pushing him to get off,
Is he?
get off the stage.
That's pretty great.
Or motioning him to get off the stage. I think it could be like a Steve Bannon kind of thing. Remember when Steve Bannon was like hailed by Newsweek and Time or some of those big publications?
Goodbye, Steve.
As the brains behind the operation. That was the end of Steve Bannon. So I would suspect that Elon Musk will not be there that
Can I
long.
make a serious comment about this before you finish? Ramaswamy has said that this kind of effort could cut $2 trillion out of a budget that I think is in the neighborhood of $7 trillion. So before you embrace this as a wonderful effort, just be aware about what might be on the chopping block if they get their way.
Everybody always talks about getting waste in government.
Everybody.
I've heard this for like 40 years.
That is correct.
And you know what happens?
Nothing.
Nothing. Never managed to get rid of the waste in the government. It's marbled. What did Barney Frank say? It was marbled through.
Marbled in, yep.
Marbled
That's
in,
what he
like
said.
in a piece of steak or something like that.
Something like that.
Okay. Anyway, we're moving on. Right after the news break, we're going to be joined by the former Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, Margaret Marshall. We're going to talk to her about the future of the Supreme Court coming up, Trump's re-election, of course, and what his immunity, the immunity decision from the Supreme Court will mean for Donald Trump in the White House. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Join GBH for the Road to Victory celebrating the Celtics. We'll hear from renowned sports writers as they discuss the Celtics' journey to their record-breaking NBA championship title. November 18th at our Brighton studios. Tickets at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Trinity Rep, presenting A Christmas Carol, a tradition reimagined anew every year, playing November 23rd through December 29th at the Providence Performing Arts Center. You can get your tickets at ppacri.org. And the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. Visitors can celebrate this Thanksgiving season by discovering secrets of the South Shore with Sea Plymouth. Learn more at seaplymouth.com/secrets.
I'm digital producer Hannah Reale, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Former Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court, Margaret Marshall, joins us for her thoughts on judicial independence in a second.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Displaying the start of what they are pledging will be a smooth transfer of power, President Biden has just met with President-elect Trump at the White House. Here's NPR's Tamara Keith.
With cameras on them, the two presidents shook hands. Biden said his administration would do everything it could to make sure Trump had what it needed for a smooth transition.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get.
Melania Trump didn't come to Washington for the visit, but First Lady Jill Biden gave the former president a handwritten letter to deliver to his wife. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Senate Republicans are backing their colleague from South Dakota, John Thune, to be the majority leader when the GOP takes control of the Senate in January. Thune will be tasked with carrying out President-elect Trump's agenda in the chamber. Thune's currently the number 2 leader in the Senate. He'll succeed Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, who's been the top-ranking Republican in the Senate since 2007. More than a week after the election, it's still unknown if the House will remain under GOP control because roughly a dozen races remain undecided. A U.S. jury has awarded 3 survivors of the Abu Ghraib prison $42 million. NPR's Ruth Sherlock reports this trial is the only case heard by an American jury detailing the abuses at the hands of U.S. troops in Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq.
The jury said a U.S. military contractor, CACI or CACI, could be found guilty of the torture and mistreatment of the plaintiffs because the interrogators it supplied to Abu Ghraib had instructed military police officers to, quote, soften up the detainees. Khaki says its employees were not responsible for, nor did they take part in mistreatment or torture committed by military police in Abu Ghraib. The guilty verdict is the result of a 16-year-long legal battle, and although it helps these three plaintiffs, many other former detainees of Abu Ghraib remain without redress. The US military has not paid compensation or set up a mechanism for the survivors' claims to be heard. Ruth Sherlock, NPR News.
Inflation in October rose 2.6% last month from a year earlier. Here's NPR's Laurel Wamsley.
Inflation last month was slightly higher than in September. Rising rents accounted for more than half of the overall increase in prices. Other things that rose in price were used cars, airfares, and medical care. Despite the uptick in prices last month, overall inflation continues to ease. But prices have risen a lot since the COVID-19 pandemic, and they were a big concern for voters in last week's election. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to slash inflation, but many economists worry that his proposed policies could make inflation worse.
That's NPR's Laurel Wamsley reporting. It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Members of Massachusetts' large Haitian community say they're horrified by the continuing turmoil in their homeland. That's with the recent dismissal of the country's prime minister, as well as gangs firing guns at 3 flights between Haiti and the United States. Dr. Gerald Goubeau is the head of Boston's Immigrant Family Services Institute and has family in Haiti.
You have gangs who are allowed to be near the airport and shoot at airplanes and things like that. So it's complete, lawlessness. It's complete lack of leadership from all over the world.
Goubeau says she blames the tumult on the legacy of U.S. colonialism, saying that it gutted Haiti's economy. She's urging the federal government to stop deporting Haitians seeking asylum. Meantime, the FAA has suspended flights between the United States and Haiti for the next month. Attorneys representing Karen Reed and Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan were in attendance at a brief hearing in court today where Brennan was asking for a delay in Reed's trial. Making his case before the judge, Brennan said this retrial must be delayed to ensure that Reed's trial is fair and that both sides are fully prepared. It was the first time Brennan has appeared in the Reed case since being named to lead it in September. Also comes a week after the Supreme Judicial Court heard oral arguments on Reed's bid to have 2 of the 3 charges she faces dismissed. No decision has yet been made. Celtics in Brooklyn tonight for a game against the Nets. We're at 46 degrees outside our studios in Brighton. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Sattva, committed to making handcrafted mattresses that help lull people to sleep and keep them sleeping soundly. More information is at SAATVA.com/NPR.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. This is hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we're streaming at YouTube/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there. Can I ask you a question, Marjorie, before I introduce our next guest? When someone is no longer holding offices, is it kosher for us to say how we feel about that person? We can, right?
I think we say things when they're holding office and not holding office.
We're joined now live at the Boston Public Library by one of our most admired guests.
That's right.
And people in general. That would be Margaret Marshall, former Chief Justice of the state's Supreme Judicial Court. As you all know, a little bit more than 20 years ago, she made same-sex marriage a reality in Massachusetts through a decision she wrote. She joins us now to discuss the state of the judiciary in this country, the future of the judiciary, and the country itself. And by the way, she will receive, I shouldn't say by the way, she will receive the highest honor bestowed by the National Judicial College, the Sandra Day O'Connor Award, tomorrow night. Justice Marshall, congratulations, and it's great to see you.
It's great
Thank
to be
you.
back.
Thank you so much for joining us, Justice Marshall. So I'll start with the question of the week. What was your reaction to the election?
Been there before, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, I love Shirley Leung. I'm a huge admirer of her. How could you not see this coming?
Did you see it coming?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you I can see it coming because I wrote to friends in South Africa and said he will be elected.
And why?
Yeah.
Because ordinary Americans are hurting badly, number one, and all over the world we have globalization of labor markets, and every country is having a hard time dealing with immigration, every single country. And I think last, we haven't understood the impact of social media. I mean, we just haven't.
You know, when you said every country is dealing with immigration, I mentioned this before, that this is not, we can seal the southern border, we can deport people if that's what we're going to do, but it's not going to solve the problem, because people are going to flee desperation forever. I mean, it's happened for centuries.
I understand. But
Yeah.
you can go back to the Brexit vote in England, and that was fundamentally, what the European Union did was open the borders. And so what you saw is English plumbers and carpenters and chimney sweeps saying, all these people are coming in and undercutting our wages. It doesn't matter what the actual on-the-ground reality is. It's that feeling.
I totally agree.
I saw a graph in the Wall Street Journal. It must have been about 1999, 2000, 2001, which showed the percentage of people immigrating to the United States as compared to the then population of the United States. And what it showed was we had a massive reform of immigration law in 1990. And up until that time, as the population of the United States grew, so grew the percentage of immigrants at a pretty steady pace. And then all of a sudden, in 1990, there was a sharp increase. And that, if you look at what's happened over the last 4 years, the Biden administration in particular, that increase has just gone through the ceiling. Now, you can be sitting in South Dakota or in Western Massachusetts and you say, we need people to work. But the perception is that it's not my country anymore. So I came as an immigrant in 1968. I became a citizen in 1977. This country has given me everything. I mean, this is the country that I love. I'm going to love it until the day I die. And when friends of mine saying, we're thinking of moving to Spain, it's like, in what planet are you living? I mean, literally, what planet? This is a great, great, great country.
But those people, I think I can speak for them, share a feeling of dread about the future, despite this country's history. You don't share that feeling, Justice Marshall?
Jim, I'm not naive, but in 1966, when I welcomed Robert Kennedy in South Africa, those were the darkest, you wouldn't have a show like this. I mean, everybody had been banned, everybody had been outlawed, the press freedoms had been decimated, and you just put one foot in front of the other and did what you needed to do. There was no light. Here there's so many shining lights.
That speech changed your life, didn't it?
It certainly did.
We have a little sound from that. This is Robert F. Kennedy, Day of Affirmation speech at the University of Cape Town in 1966. Just a touch.
We must recognize the full human equality of all of our people before God, before the law, and in the councils of government. We must do this not because it is economically advantageous, although it is, not because the laws of God command it, although they do. We must do it for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do.
Oh, God. What did it feel? Do you remember the physical feeling of that moment listening to Kennedy in Cape Town?
I certainly do. I mean, it feels like yesterday, and it was,
58 years ago.
58, almost 60 years ago. What I try to convey to people and why I'm hopeful about this country, I mean, think of what this country has done. I mean, every time we think we are going to lose it, what's the it? It's the magical form of democracy that we started off in the late 18th century. And for 237 years now, I mean, we are the longest lived democracy the world has ever seen. And I'm not walking away from that. And I don't care. Elon Musk is a South African.
I'm well aware of that.
I know. Did you know little Elon back at home?
I don't know. He and I seem to have taken different paths. Maybe I should have taken his path. But, I mean, of course it's a challenge, but it doesn't terrify me. I mean, who are the people who've, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela. You have to find a path.
Find me a Nelson Mandela and I'll be a little bit more hopeful. Let me tell you the thing I'm most nervous about is the Supreme Court. They stood up to Trump during his presidency on some things, on other things they didn't. And then not too long ago, they issued a decision that I would say has got to be in the top 10 worst decisions in my estimation. I'm nervous saying this in front of you. This immunity decision, to me, was a total capitulation to the Trump presidency. I'd like to hear your thoughts both on the decision and whether you, unlike the majority of the American people, have confidence that this court will actually uphold the Constitution.
We're in an era where, for some reason, not just in our country, but in many countries, we seem to be drawn to strong executives. I mean, here, Italy, Hungary, Turkey, just about every place you can think of. And so I think first and foremost, what concerns me is this kind of need for authoritarianism, or this need for a powerful executive presence. I am informed, I have no way of knowing, that Chief Justice Roberts didn't understand that his opinion would be viewed as a pro-Trump opinion. Now, what that says to me is that the Chief Justice is surrounded by people and is not out there. But I might also say that might be for those of us who didn't see this coming either. Jim, I'm going to answer your question, but I'll just tell you one thing. I don't sign an online petition. I care passionately about an independent judiciary. I worked hard for it when I was the Chief Justice. And what do? I come and talk on, shows, wonderful shows like yours. I go into schools. I accept awards and give speeches. You have to work at it. There's a wonderful saying of Sandra Day O'Connor, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who's a huge hero of mine, who said, understanding the Constitution is not passed through the gene pool. You have to learn it over and over and over again. And I think if you ask Americans, do you want to have the feeling that when you go into court, you will only get justice if you are either rich or powerful? I mean, most Americans would say no. In Massachusetts, we don't have elected judges. I work very hard to make sure we don't have elected judges. But while I was Chief Justice, I had to strengthen judicial accountability. We had to increase judicial education. We had to have reviews because people want to know that their government is working.
We have a Supreme Court with virtually no judicial accountability. I think we'd agree when it comes to the Clarence Thomases of the world, to some degree the Justice Alitos of the world, which is one of the reasons that only 37% trust them to do the right thing.
And I would say, if I were an American age 21, I would start working to amend our Constitution so there were time limits.
Term limits on them.
Whatever it is. The citizens of Massachusetts in 1972 all got together and said you can be on the Supreme Judicial Court for life, Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court for life, subject to mandatory retirement at age 70. Every single county, every single district voted in favor of that. Don't tell me that you can't change the Constitution. You have to change the Constitution.
You don't have to change the Constitution to expand the court. Do you support that?
Yes.
You do. And how do you respond to the argument that goes, Democrats, if they're ever in control again, they'll expand. Republicans in control, they'll expand, and it just never ends.
Well, we'll have 40 judges, and then sooner or later somebody will have to deal with everybody, and they'll strike a deal.
We're talking to former Chief Justice of the SJC, Margaret Marshall.
I don't have your perspective, obviously, because I didn't come here from South Africa and see what went on down there in the days of apartheid. But as an American who did grow up here thinking that, United States is one of these countries that we'd sooner or later always do the right thing, I've lost that sense now. You don't think I should have? Okay.
No, you just take, look, I love everybody who's born in America, but you take it for granted.
We do.
That your freedom will go on forever. You have to work for it. You have to be you have to teach civics in the schools. And if the government isn't paying for civics teachers, go and volunteer in the schools.
But, I think we've been let down by so many places, the judiciary being one of them, because I think that you do get the sense, I don't know if you were saying, I wasn't sure what you were saying, but to me, we do have the sense now that the courts work for you if you're rich and powerful. If you're not rich and powerful, even though they do sometimes, that they don't. We've seen this with Trump defy all these court cases and get away with them. And now, instead of having a government of laws, we have this, and the president, no one is above the law. Apparently the president is above the law now because of this immunity decision. That's how it feels to me.
I understand that, and there have been times when it feels as if the courts are way out of whack. I mean, there have been so many decisions over the decades. The courts are not the places to protect democracy. They really aren't. The people protect democracy. The legislature, the juries, the voters. When you have people attempting to take away the vote, you have to fight like crazy. I mean, I had the great privilege of meeting and talking to John Lewis, the great civil rights leader. He went into Congress. He had to work across the aisle. He worked across the aisle. He didn't give up because they'd practically beaten him to death.
Yeah, fractured his skull.
I mean,
them in Pettus Bridge.
The question for me is it worth fighting for? I want to go back. The United States, it gave me everything. I thought law was a vehicle of oppression. I really didn't know what I was doing in the world. I came to the United States, and it is the story of immigrant after immigrant after immigrant. You come here and you discover how free this country is, how wonderful it is, how open it is. Now, they've been terrible demagogues. I mean, I'm not whitewashing American history. Think of the civil rights movement. But, states, there are thousands of judges in the United States. Yeah, there are 9 people, sit in Washington. But there are thousands of judges who every day are trying to do the best they can. But if you don't tell them what you want them to do, and if you don't have good lawyers, sooner or later people will change. Let me go back to expanding the court, Jim, because I'm
of course.
So Franklin Roosevelt threatened to expand the court, threatened to extend it. And look what he said. That was one of his great failures. I don't think it was a failure.
He got what he wanted.
He got what he wanted. And I think when President...
Explain, not an expansion of the court, but legislation that he wanted.
Well, he got the legislation, but much more important, he got the 9 justices on the court who had refused to, who kept overruling the New Deal legislation. Right. They changed. A switch in time changed 9, right? It's not quite that. I don't know why President Biden, out of the box, said, I don't want to expand the court. Why? Well, because I know the answers. Well, then when they get in, they'll expand it. I don't know what would have happened to the court if the court thought it suddenly was going to get 4, 5, or 6 new justices.
It's a wonderful point. So can we just switch this for a minute? Not me expressing worry about the Supreme Court not doing the right thing, which I think more often than not it is not. They do the right thing. And to quote President Andrew Jackson, and no one knows if this quote is real, John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Donald Trump says, thank you very much. I'm going to keep doing whatever it is I did that you consider to be unconstitutional. I'm guessing your response is the only way to deal with that is for people to do what you said they have to do, which is stand up and be heard. That's the only protection we have.
Yes, but you also have... For example, we had, with Brown against Board of Education, which was only 50-something years ago, 70 years ago, I'm getting old, 70 years ago, we had to send federal troops in to get that court order enforced. Do I worry that you might get another court order and you would have to send troops in and the president wouldn't send troops in? Of course I worry about that, but we are just at the beginning. Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, he says one thing and then he says another thing. There are lots of opportunities. There are lots of opportunities for both parties to work together. Nancy Pelosi would say the Democratic Party is the party of working people. There's been a huge increase of unionization in this country. Are you telling me that they can never make a deal? Elizabeth Warren and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance working on banking regulation.
They did. We talked to her about that, yeah.
I mean, you have to do it. It's hard. It's not easy. It's not a song in the park.
You're a little too hopeful for me, Justice Marshall. I have to tell you. So I know you hate these kind of questions because I asked them in the past. I once asked Justice Marshall on the show, so when you go to a cocktail party with Supreme Court justices, do you ever say to them, so what are you going to rule? And the look on this woman's face when I asked that, so I'm almost embarrassed to ask this, but I'm going to do it anyway. You know there's talk about whether or not, in Democratic circles, about whether or not Justice Sotomayor, who is 70, has some health issues, even though her staff says she's fine, should step down now so we don't have another situation where a great justice like Ruth Bader Ginsburg sticks around, dies under Trump, and we get Amy Coney Barrett as opposed to what we might have had had she resigned earlier. Should Sotomayor step down from the bench?
I've got two answers to that. No, because we're not going to get a new justice in before...
Coney Barrett was in a month.
For some reasons, we didn't manage to get somebody in through with...
non-Justice Merrick Garland.
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead.
And the second thing is I want to say that my respect for Justice Stephen Breyer, who I think gets far too little credit for what he did. One reason, by stepping down when he's, he's physically fine, he's mentally on top of the game. If there are two things that have saddened me about this country, it is that my generation, I'm 80, and the people above me have held on and held on and held on and not stepped aside. I've seen it in academia. There used to be mandatory retirement at age 70. It has nothing to do with mental competency. It has to do with moving over for new generations. I was a great admirer of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I cannot hold the Republican Party responsible for what happened to the court. She should not have remained when she was so desperately ill. I admire Justice Breyer. I have a lot of regard for President Biden. I do not understand why he stayed for as long as he did. I mean, I think that Vice President Kamala Harris, 100 days, we've never elected a woman. I mean, you have to make...
You know, we never had a woman Chief Justice till somebody. Do you know who that was? You do, okay. Okay.
But I'm saying, it's a kind of hubris. It's a selfishness. In your 40s, in your 50s, but why do we keep holding on? Because we're living longer and longer. And my very strong view is move aside. I hope I'm still intelligent and I hope I can still put sentences together. When I left the court, well, let me just back up. Chief Justice Wilkins was a great Chief Justice. He hit mandatory retirement at age 70, great Chief Justice of Massachusetts. He turned 70. Governor Cellucci appointed me. I turned 70. I was the first woman. He appointed Chief Justice Gantz, the first Chief Justice Ireland, the first African American. Then Chief Justice Gantz, the first Jewish Chief Justice. Then the great Chief Justice at the moment, Kimberly Bunn. But that's what happens when you move aside and let new ideas.
So I want to be clear. I'm sorry. I want to be clear. If Chuck Schumer said, "I have the votes to hold hearings and confirm a nominee, President Biden, if you appoint him or her today before January 20th, would you urge Sotomayor to step down?"
Yes.
Okay.
If that was guaranteed.
I understand.
And not other. I mean, she's wonderful, and I just saw it, 2 weeks ago. It has nothing to do with mental competency.
Understood.
Chief Justice Marshall, you said at the beginning of this conversation that Americans are hurting and that immigration is going on all over the world and that we had a huge explosion of people coming across the border, which we did. So are you saying that you can understand because of that why Trump won, because Democrats were not taking the immigration issue or the economic issue as seriously as they should have?
I think they weren't articulating a vision. For example, when you ask Vice President Harris, Joe Biden clearly opened the borders. Now, one answer would be to say, look, there were children in cages. We had to change the policy. Why President Biden said, we welcome everybody who wants to come to the United States. It overwhelmed the system. People who were waiting to come legally just felt that, I mean, why not go illegal if you want to walk across the border? Of course we're a magnet. By the way, I would say the same thing in South Africa. South Africa is at the tip of Africa. It's one of the most successful economies. They are having a very difficult time keeping their borders closed, and the consequence of which people who fought hard to end apartheid, they are being undermined by people coming from... I've got nothing against Kenyans or Nigerians or Zambians. To the extent that we still have nation states can and should protect their borders. And if you happen to be a fabulous economy, as the United States is, not for consumers, but globally, our economy is terrific, of course people are going to want to come here. But does that mean to say that we can't control our borders? Of course not. Now, you can point fingers and say there was legislation that had been agreed to by the Republican Party and the Democratic Party until Donald Trump, apparently, President-elect Donald Trump said, kill the legislation. Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But can we go back again and try to negotiate? That's what I mean. There's plenty.
Kamala Harris said she'd file that legislation again on day one had she been elected, for whatever it's worth.
And it may be that he's going to file it on day two.
Can we talk about a happy thing for 1 second, and then
I
we'll get
thought
back
I
to
was.
one? Well, no, you've been really upbeat, which means you'll never be on the show again because we don't do upbeat here. So, Sandra Day O'Connor, I think I read that it was 191 years, give or take a few, before the first woman justice, associate justice, was nominated to the Supreme Court. How many years before the first woman Chief Justice of the SJC? A couple hundred?
306.
You knew O'Connor, did you not?
Yeah, I did.
Can you tell us? I mean, you're getting this award tomorrow night, which is huge, needless to say, and to say it's well-deserved is almost ridiculous because it's so obvious. Tell us a little bit about not only her as a person, but that kind of person and how she saw her role on a court.
The most important thing to know about Justice O'Connor, I think, is apart from her childhood growing up on a farm, she was a state legislator and she was a state intermediate appellate judge, but especially a state legislator. We don't have anybody on our United States Supreme Court who has ever run for election.
That is amazing.
Now that is the first, when Justice David Souter stepped down, Justice Souter ran for election in New Hampshire. He was Attorney General, and then he served on the New Hampshire Supreme Court. That was the first time in our history that we had nobody who had either run for election,
Nor did I.
run for election, or served in state government. You know, Chief Justice Earl Warren had been the governor of California. In other words, it's not Republican or Democratic. It seems to me that one way to look at the United States Supreme Court is that it is very out of touch with the mass of this wonderful, bubbling, vibrant country in which we live. You have to go to Harvard or Yale law schools, only now you can go to Notre Dame. You go from those...
Coney Barrett, for those who don't know.
You go from there and you go and work for a federal judge, usually an appellate judge, then you go and clerk on the United States Supreme Court, then you go and work in the Justice Department, Federal Justice Department, or for the Solicitor General, then maybe you go and teach at Harvard or Yale, and then you become a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
And
so you're suggesting, I guess, that one of the reasons she was as successful a force on the court was because of the experience that she brought there.
Absolutely. She was down to earth. Man, I'm not saying these people are elitists. I hate that
I understand.
But their life experience had been so different. One
last question from me, get back to the negative side of the tracks where I am most comfortable. Justice Marshall, Judge Merchan in New York, who I consider a pretty courageous guy when not only you being threatened, but your daughter is being threatened because of her political views, even though she has nothing to do with the case, has a pretty tough decision. is why I think I speak for Marjorie. The notion that Donald Trump would escape all criminal liability, particularly post-conviction, is appalling. But I have to say there's a piece of me that when I hear others say the people knew about these convictions and they decided they wanted him in the Oval Office rather than in a cell or as a convicted felon, is a pretty powerful argument. It pains me, but it's a powerful argument. What should, and Judd Merchant, when he heard arguments from both sides, says, I want to think about this. He might dismiss all of the cases. He might sentence him. What's the right thing for Merchant to do?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's a very hard judge. You know, I was married to a journalist who was so critical.
A journalist.
Oh, no, come on, Jim. I was married to a journalist who was so critical of Gerald Ford when he pardoned President Nixon. I mean, he wrote a scathing series of columns in the New York Times. And 5 or 10 years later, he publicly apologized to President Gerald Ford.
Why?
Because he felt that President Ford had made the correct decision to pardon President Nixon, keeping in mind our country. We are a very divided country in some ways at the moment. And I think while it may not be at the forefront of a judge's mind, certainly we have overwhelmingly elected, a man to be the next president of the United States. It's not like Boston and Mayor Curley, who was in prison, and people in Boston re-elected him the mayor of Boston. This is our nation. We are the most powerful nation in the world. And I think it is entirely, what I would do is whatever Judge Marchand's decision is, I would support that decision and let the system play out. That's what I would do.
Can we say the name of your wonderful husband for young people who don't know? Anthony Lewis, one of the great journalists of our time. Justice Marshall, it is a thrill not only to see you, to anticipate seeing you, I should say. We're thrilled to have you. Please join us in thanking former Chief Justice Marshall.
And thank you for lifting the mood around here. It's been very glum.
Won't last. It's okay. It won't last.
It will.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
To make it last.
We'll
Thank
do our
you
best.
very much.
Thank you so much.
And looking forward to seeing you again soon for our birthday celebration.
Yes, we're going to be doing
yes,
that.
We
are doing that.
We have been speaking with Margaret Marshall, who's the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Massachusetts. She's going to receive the highest honor bestowed by the National Judicial College, the Sandra Day O'Connor Award, tomorrow night. And congratulations again to you, Justice Marshall. Thank you for coming in. Up next, we're going to open the lines to get your thoughts on Thanksgiving. We're going right down and dirty now. We're talking about people not being able to have Thanksgiving together because of the election. This happened before in 2016. It's happening again big time. Fox's Jesse Waters has been disinvited from his family Thanksgiving by his own mother, who said, "You're not coming." We know this is because he dedicated an entire segment to it on his show. We're going to ask you about your family situation, how you handle these things. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Latino evangelicals who support Donald Trump are pretty excited about the direction the president-elect is taking the country.
His understanding of how America should be according to the Constitution is based on Christian values. So that's what I'm going to aim towards.
What they hope he'll do in office on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.org. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBHnews. I'm almost feeling positively or semi-positively, or at least not negatively for a few minutes. Believe it or not, Thanksgiving is just over 2 weeks away. If you're anything like our beloved listener, Liliana from Fall River, who called, I think, yesterday or the day before, the table is already set. Good silverware is ready. The meal is being prepped as we speak. But who will be seated at that communal table this year? If you listen to Liliana, not people in her family who supported the other guy, well, that replicated itself with Fox News host Jesse Waters. He lamented on his own show, to his credit, that his mother has disinvited him from this year's Thanksgiving gathering. Here's Waters.
Yeah, people are taking some space in the Waters household. I'll have you know that I was not invited to my mother's house for Thanksgiving. Apparently, there wasn't enough room. She said it was a scheduling situation, and then at the last second invited me to come over on Black Friday. I told her no thanks, I'll be at Best Buy.
So, are you prepping your excuses to give some people the boot for this year's Thanksgiving? And what are your excuses for why you just can't go to your aunt or uncle's this year? Or are you gearing up for the annual event, fireworks and all, Adele music ready to play at a moment's notice? We'll remind you about that in a couple of minutes. 877-301-8970. You have, use this word, you have diversity in your family.
Well, not at Thanksgiving. I do have diversity in my family, but not at Thanksgiving. It will not be a mixed Thanksgiving, no.
Wait, by intention? You didn't tell me this.
No, it's just by accident. It's just by accident that the people I'm going to be with on Thanksgiving are all on the same political page. So
and what if they
spend
weren't?
The whole time talking
Could
about.
You handle?
Well, it's hard because you don't. What you want to avoid is talking about politics, and it's hard, I think, for people to avoid talking about politics so soon after the election. But I just wanted to say about Jesse Waters.
Yeah.
What he didn't mention in that clip was that apparently he was such a pain in the neck at the Thanksgiving, the first time Trump won election, that he cleared the place out.
That's what his mother
says. People couldn't stand
and
listening to him anymore, so they had to leave the whole Thanksgiving dinner, and she doesn't want to have that happen again. She wants to have a lovely time without everybody getting into a big fight and screaming at each other over the creamed onions or something like that. And apparently, there are she's a child psychologist, his mother is. She probably wonders what happened, that she gave birth to a guy that turned out to be Jesse Waters. But in any case, I guess she has read, or he has read some of her blistering text to him.
Good for him.
Over the air. So there you go.
So we want to know a couple of things. One, if you either want to opt out or you want to opt somebody else out, let us know. But also, if you're doing it, if you're going to what Marjorie calls it, what do you call it, a mixed gathering?
It is not a mixed gathering.
But if you are going to a mixed gathering, do you feel apprehension? How are you planning on handling it? By the way, it's a real issue. This is not like this is a real issue and a sad issue, I should say, for a lot of people.
We should mention that there's this whole takeoff of these solo travelers in their 30s and 40s on these group adventures. I guess there's a company called Flashpack that connects these solo travelers, and a lot of people just skip the holidays altogether because they're too painful now, and they go and spend Christmas in Tanzania or Thanksgiving on the Nile, Jim. That's what they do to get away from the home if they have the money to spend.
Do you want to hear a really cruel text?
Sure, okay.
The cruel text is, best decision Ms. Waters ever made, well, except if she had decided for birth control. But that is 877-301-89.
Well, he is obnoxious. Can you imagine?
But your mother disinvites you from Thanksgiving?
She can't take it. You know, I saw Dana Bash on CNN interviewing Jim Jordan the other day, and Jim Jordan,
Chair of the House Judiciary
Committee. Shut up. I had to interview, unfortunately for me, you were gone that day, Corey Lewandowski, the other Trump guy from New Hampshire, saying,
What's your point?
They never shut up. You can't get them to shut up.
So what's your point?
Well, I think that you don't want someone machine gunning your table. I mean that obviously in the figurative sense, with their verbiage all over the Thanksgiving dinner and ruining the fun. And you can just imagine, if you haven't seen Jesse Waters on Fox, check him out. You'll know what I mean. Could you eat dinner with him or sit with him for 3 hours?
There are actually a lot of people I couldn't eat dinner with, and there are a lot of people who wouldn't want to eat dinner with me.
Well,
Andrew from Exeter, New Hampshire says, I'm at Jesse Waters' mom's house all the time. I'll say hi for him. 877-301-8970. Let's start with Britain, I think it is. I hope that's right, in Roslindale. Hey there.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Excellent. Thank you for calling.
All right, so here's a life hack for everybody listening. If you need to get out of Thanksgiving dinner, you go to Last Hope Canine, they're a rescue here in Boston, and you adopt one of their dogs that needs surgery, like I did. This dog, the sweetest thing, beautiful pit bull mix. She had a couple bad knees. She needed surgery. I drop her off today for surgery. The next 2 months is recuperation. I can't leave the house because I got to take care of this dog. So when my in-laws are upset that we can't go to Ohio and have, Thanksgiving dinner and argue about Donald Trump, I could say, sorry, I'm doing the good thing. I'm helping this poor sweet dog.
Wait a second. Wow. I want to understand something.
Wow.
Did you do that because you're a kind soul, or did you specifically do the surgery needing dog thing to avoid Thanksgiving?
I mean, I wish I was that cunning. This just happened to work out the way it worked out.
Okay,
we were looking at the sweet dog, and she needed it. But you know what? I mean, it is a perfect excuse because it's in the Thanksgiving spirit, right? Be thankful, be giving, and you get to help a dog, and I don't have to drive to Ohio and listen to my Trump-voting in-laws go through their whole thing.
It's like a twofer, we call it in the trade. Britton, that's an excellent call. Good luck to the dog. You're a good person for doing that, regardless of what your motivation is.
Very impressive. Here's Ken from Worcester. I won't be having Thanksgiving with my in-laws. I will invite migrants to sit in their place.
That's very nice.
Yes. And then an anonymous texter says, I simply tell people that as a vegan, I get depressed looking at a turkey carcass as a centerpiece and think of its death. This usually comes after they say that I can eat the fixins, Jim, instead.
By the way, we have mentioned to you every time we talk about getting together with family. No, we'll get to Fixins probably in about a week, and we'll have a big fight about it. We always mention this, one of the best SNL skits ever.
Oh, yeah.
And we never play any sound from it, so we're going to do it now. This is from season 41. And a family's together for Thanksgiving, and almost everything that's said is about to lead to a fight. And when there's about to be a fight, they play Adele. Here it is.
Why is it that your friends keep antagonizing the police?
Why would you ask my boyfriend that?
I'm just trying to get to know Jamal.
That's very constitutional.
Hello, it's me. I was wondering if after all these years you'd like to be.
Oh, your grandparents are here.
I love. By the way, when she says it's 80, what's her name? She says, "I'm just trying to get to know Jamal." I mean, it is a brilliant scene.
And they repeat it. As soon as the song stops, and they all start fighting and screaming
and then
again.
They play a song
and then the little
again.
kid runs over and puts it back on to try to get some peace. I think this is a big thing. We're getting these. Lori and Taunton. Fortunately, I've already cut ties from the 2016 election, so I don't have to worry. I won't sit at the table with someone who voted to take my children's rights away. Aaron and Hopkinton. I'm very conflicted because both my boomer parents voted for Trump. I love them, but can't understand how they could support such a foul man, their granddaughter's futures, etc. And here's an anonymous texter. I've never been so grateful that I live 1,500 miles away from my family in Oklahoma. I will be having a cozy, peaceful day with just my husband and my dog. So this is a big thing.
We laugh at this, by the way. It is horrible, isn't it? Isn't it horrible?
Yes, it is
that
horrible.
That you lose somebody you love. I mean, and by the way, I get it. I'd have a hard time if I had that situation that they're describing.
Well,
but
you begin to have a very superficial relationship because you can't talk about so many things. It's just like small talk all the time, and it's very discouraging.
Margaret and I were going to have lunch last week, and we agreed we would not discuss the Mass Teachers Association at all.
That's right.
During our lunch. Let's go to Rebecca in Rhode Island. Rebecca, thank you for calling the show. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Excellent. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say, I after the 2016, we pretty much, felt like we didn't want to do Thanksgiving with the in-law side that are evangelical and very much Trump supporters. So the other thing was they were gluten-free. So for us, that was always a challenge. not to knock allergies, but so anyway, this year my husband and I are taking our 6-year-old to Bermuda because we thought that was a pretty good thing to do.
How'd you deal with this? But the first time you had an encounter in 2016, how did you not do the holiday thing? What would you do? What'd you say?
We did do the holiday one time, and it was really awkward. So after that, we vowed to never have to do it again. So we came up with a couple different excuses. Went for a hike last year, but this year decided we just had to get out of town. So.
And do the in-laws know that this is why you're not there? I mean, in their hearts?
I think they do. That side doesn't really talk about anything, whereas my immediate side talks about everything, and it's more comfortable. So it's almost more awkward to not talk about things.
Enjoy your trip, Rebecca. That was great. Thank you so much for the call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. Ed text, I will be stapling my tongue to my lower lip to avoid reacting to the one Trumper in our family.
Here's Peter on the North Shore. I have a friend who's a Trump supporter. I cut him out of my life for the rest of the year, but he has no one else on Thanksgiving. So I feel obligated to invite him. Guess my empathy makes me the a-hole.
He was having a big party that he could go to?
Who?
Mr. Pillow's house. Mr. Pillow or his pillow or something is having a whatever. Kathy in Providence, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Kathy.
Hi. I am going to my brother's house, and my brother's a Trumper and really can't keep it in his pants. So I've worked with my
Go ahead.
I've worked with my two kids who are 15 and 11. When mom says it's time to go, it's time to go. And my brother conveniently likes to kick it up before dinner, thinking you'll be indentured to the dinner. And I'm not. I told my kids I have a whole Thanksgiving meal at home. So if we leave, we'll have Thanksgiving still. But he's done this before my birthday, too, before cake. And I actually left before the cake. He thinks he has me. And I'm like, I'm not staying for a meal. I didn't for bad dating, and I won't for Thanksgiving dinner.
I didn't for bad dating.
Good for you,
So, Kathy, can you describe the moment when he does what he does, whether it's your birthday or a holiday, and you decide I'm leaving? What do you say? What happens in that moment? I'm done. I'm leaving. What do you say?
I've actually told him to stop talking politics because when my dad, who's 89, passes, I'll have nothing to do with him. I said we had a relationship before politics. I want to get back to gardening and talking about construction projects. He will not stop. So he just starts to say something behind the scenes, and I know it's about politics. I've educated every boyfriend about him. He actually will say, hey, what about that movie 2016 or 2020? Just so my boyfriend, who knows not to fall for the bait, says, what movie are you talking about? And then he drops it. He does it. He goes in the back door all the time.
Can I tell you something? I love the concept of you having a Thanksgiving dinner ready at home and telling your kids you have a backup plan if the brother things fall apart. That's an incredible story. Kathy, I admire you. Good luck on Thanksgiving. Thanks for the call.
I'm eating at the kids' table. Much more pleasant conversation, says one of our texters.
Well, that's actually not a horrible idea.
Yeah, it is really too bad.
Sad. How about the guy you mentioned a minute ago that has nobody else?
No, well, maybe that's why.
Maybe he has nobody else. That's a very good point.
Jen in New Hampshire, thank you for calling.
Hello, Jen.
Hi, how are you?
We're good. Thank you for calling.
So we're slated to have a Thanksgiving with my parents this year. My dad's a Trumper and my brother's a Trumper, and we're just not going to go. I have not mentioned it. Thanksgiving has been mentioned, and if it's mentioned, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, we have our own plans. Because Thanksgiving is always about sitting around and having small talk, and it always becomes political. And I can't handle it. We are a bleeding heart liberal family. And, you know, as my oldest is, I endearingly refer to as part of the alphabet mafia. So it's going to eventually come up, and I don't want to deal with it. So we're just not going to go. I'm not going to come up with any silly excuses. We're just going to say, no, I don't think it's a good idea this year. And it hurts, but it will hurt more if I say something that I'm going to regret.
I really admire you. That was beautiful. That was beautifully put. It's sad, but
I can't
beautifully
do that.
put. Thank you, Jen.
I have to come up with a reason all the time.
But why? Why?
I don't know, because then someone will say, why? Why?
Well, why? Well, then what? I mean, I don't know if I'd have the courage.
I can't say.
Why can't you say?
No comment. I mean, what do I say?
What if you say, I take the fifth? What if you say, I just don't want to get in a fight about politics? It's going to ruin the holiday for me.
That would be the answer.
But that's not a criticism directly of them, even though indirectly it is. It's just I don't want contentiousness on a holiday. It's supposed to be happy. So the path of least resistance is I'll stay home, and I was going to say and watch a Woody Allen movie. You can't do that anymore. You used to watch Hannah and Her Sisters every Thanksgiving.
I did used to watch Hannah and Her Sisters.
By the way, did you see the photograph? Has anybody seen the photograph online of Bruce Springsteen with glasses next to Woody Allen with glasses? And I am telling you, I'm raising my right hand. They don't look alike. You could not tell them apart if you didn't know who was who. Let's go to Reverend Jim. That's exactly what we need in Plymouth. Hello, Reverend Jim. Nice to talk to you again.
Hey, folks. Good to talk to you again as well. Actually, I have a sad story. I'm part of a found family. 30 plus years ago, we were found by a son that my mother's had out of wedlock, and he was adopted and ended up doing a search and finding us. She had long passed. But we've got a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences as well. And it's reached a point where I just had this conversation with my wife this morning that I'm now reduced. I've decided that I'm only going to see my brother at weddings and funerals. A couple of years ago, we were together at Thanksgiving, and he was insufferable. And the not only in politics, but in religion as well. I believe he's a Christian nationalist, and I'm a Christian against Christian nationalism. And it breaks my heart, to be honest with you. Thanksgiving should be that family gathering where we just gather for a good meal. It's not a big drinking holiday. It's a celebration of our country and being together and being with family. And I'm very, very sad to say that that's now passed from my life.
Well,
wow.
That was a horrible story. Yeah. I'm so glad you're willing to share it, though, Reverend Jim. Thank you for doing that. Bill in Boston says, all I can think is this might be Trump's greatest crime, for which I can only hope history will record and remember. He has done this to all of us. We can't even talk to our family anymore.
Listen to this. I want to have Thanksgiving with my in-laws. I figured they ruined the next 4 years for me. The least I can do is ruin Thanksgiving for them. So that's a pretty good one. You know, that's what they were talking about Jesse Waters, that he was so obnoxious, and you can see it because you can see him on TV.
Do you think that's hyperbole? I mean, the mother and he both say that every single person left the Thanksgiving.
Well, it's like I said about Corey Lewandowski. I mean, it's like a bombardment. You have to hide under the table, and you're in the fetal position.
Remember
this
my
is not
Corey
the way you want to
Lewandowski
spend.
Story?
The White House.
One of our coworkers, a family member, has a relationship to Corey Lewandowski. Margie and I were in Washington for the week before the first Trump inauguration, and I had an interview with Lewandowski, who was then his campaign manager, in his office. And he motioned me to the corner of his office, sort of a triangular office, and where he could see the White House. And he pointed to a room in the White House, and he says, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Well, I know it's the White House." And he says, "That's President Trump's bedroom." And he started to well up. That was I'm not laughing. I'm just telling you, there are two sides, I guess you could say. But apparently you didn't see that.
You remember they used to talk about, you're not supposed to talk about sex, politics, money, and religion.
Well, this is one of those things.
Yeah, but that's one of the things you weren't supposed to talk about. So what did people talk about? You couldn't talk about sex,
you did
politics,
you did talk about politics, but politics wasn't like this.
No, it's one of those things
is
you weren't supposed to talk about.
I know, but you did anyway, what I'm saying. Okay. But it wasn't like this, and it wasn't as tense and painful as this is. John and Whitman, you're going to do it. You're last. You have about a minute. Go. Hi.
Last again, third time, long time. I've been here. I've been here, living here for 30 years, and I have never celebrated Thanksgiving yet. And
why is that?
It's a Thursday off. I used to work 6 days a week. My wife worked 6 days a week. We raised our family. I was 35 when I arrived here. I'm 67 now, and this is my last one.
What is? I'm afraid to. What does that mean?
Why is it your last one, John?
Why is the last
one? I've got 3 months.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, John, I'm really, really, really sorry.
I'm sorry.
Oh, my
but
God.
Thank you.
John, thank you for calling. Call us again, John, actually, please. Thank you for the call. Wow. That's tough. We're done.
We are done.
We're done.
Yes. Thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you, John, for that call. Keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tune in tomorrow for NBC's Chuck Todd, MIT economist John Gruber, a music roundtable. These are such fun.
These are your favorites. I know.
With